Chapter 993. The 5th year of Jinghe, the 3rd day of May. In 2 days it would be the Dragon Boat Festival. In the Jing Kingdom, although the Dragon Boat Festival was not as grand as the New Year Festival, the Lantern Festival, or the Mid-Autumn Festival, it was still one of the most important festivals. On the 5th day of May, people would eat rice dumplings, hang mugwort and calamus in front of their houses, and drink realgar wine. These were all the customs of the Jing Kingdom. On every important festival, the court would allow officials to rest for at least half a day. Most people would also choose to put down their work and relax. At this time, the brothel was a good place for them to go. Every year around the Dragon Boat Festival, the most popular play in the brothel was The Legend of the White Snake. On the day of the Dragon Boat Festival, the white snake drank realgar wine and showed its true form. Su Xian was scared to death. The white snake broke into the underworld and fought with the ghost, putting on a show of going to the underworld to save her husband. This play was suitable for the occasion and was loved by the audience. However, when the people of the Jing Kingdom walked out of their houses early in the morning and wanted to go to the brothel to watch the play, they were shocked to find that the brothel was gone. There was a notice at the entrance of the brothel. The door was closed and many people were stopped outside. Why did it close all of a sudden? I watched a few plays inside a few days ago. Why is it gone today? Strangely, the brothel on the next street closed. I walked half a street, but I didn't expect this one to be closed too. While people were talking, someone in the shop next to the brothel poked his head out and said, "It was closed yesterday." You don't know, right? More than half of the brothel in the Jing Kingdom is closed. It seems that they are moving somewhere. If you want to watch the play, you have to walk 2 more streets. After knowing this, many people couldn't help but sigh. In the past, when there were not many brothel in the Jing Kingdom, they didn't think this place was very good. Later, the number of brothel gradually increased, and the plays inside were getting better and better. In the past 2 years, they had already gotten used to it. Now that they returned to the days 2 years ago, they always felt that something was missing. After walking 2 streets to another street, they finally realized what was missing. More than half of the brothel was gone. Many shops on the street were also closed. No one knew whether they were closed or temporarily. It was as if the entire capital had become empty in one night. On the palace wall, a figure stood silently. No one knew how long he had been standing there. A palace maid came up from below and put a robe on the girl's shoulders. She advised, "His Highness has been gone for 2 days. The wind is strong here. Princess, it's better to go back earlier." Since the first day of the 5th month, the girl, who had been standing on the city wall for a long time, smiled and said, "Standing here, I can see the farthest. If he comes back one day, I will be able to see him from afar." She looked to the west again and turned back to ask, "How is the academy?" The palace maid nodded and said, "His Highness has already arranged everything for the princess." "But princess, where do we find the teachers and students of the academy?" She smiled and said, "Teacher gave me an academy, so of course I have to find my own teachers and students." Hall of Diligent Government. Li Xian pushed open the door of the hall and stretched. He rubbed his head, which was a little swollen from dealing with the memorials, and let out a long sigh of relief. Although he wanted to push all the government affairs to Emmingzu and be a free and unfettered emperor, if Emmingzu was too tired, that guy would definitely find him the next time he saw him. It was better to offend the King of Hell than to offend the Jianghu of Silla. This risk could not be taken. He left just like that. What a disloyal guy. Li Xian sighed. If he left, there would be no one around him to talk to. Suddenly, he thought of something and his eyes lit up. Shinshu. It seemed that he had not seen this guy for a long time. When he walked out of the hall, a eunuch immediately came up to him and asked, "Your Majesty?" Li Xian waved his hand and said, "Go to Prime Minister Shin's mansion." Not long after, in the Shin mansion of the capital, the gatekeeper scratched his head and asked in surprise, "Young master, are you sure you did not find the wrong person?" A young master looked at him and asked with a frown, "What do you mean?" The young master in front of him had an air of nobility. The gatekeeper did not dare to offend him and said with a smile, "Young master, there is no one called Shin Shu in our Shin mansion." The young master was startled and said angrily, "Nonsense. He clearly said that he is from your Shin mansion." The gatekeeper had a bitter expression on his face. When he saw someone coming out of the mansion, he immediately stepped forward and said, "Third young master, this young master said he was looking for someone called Shin Shu, but there really isn't anyone called Shin Shu in our mansion." The young man who walked out of the Shin mansion looked at the young master who was in a trance and asked, "Brother, how do you write the name of the person you are talking about?" "Shin is the Shin of your Shin mansion. Shu is the number of Shu." The young man cupped his hands in obeisance and said, Brother, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. There are many people with the surname Shin in the capital, but in our Shin residence, there is no one called Shin Shu that you're looking for. Really? Li Xian asked uncertainly. The young man nodded and said, Really? The expressions of the young man and the gatekeeper did not seem to be fake. Li Xian's body shook. He and Shin Shu hit it off at first sight and they were friends. When he said that he was from the Shin mansion, he never doubted it and did not verify it. He never thought that even his identity was a lie. In the capital there were only two people who could be called his friends. Now, one had abandoned him and left, and the other one was actually a fake? Haha. A self-mocking smile appeared on his face. He did not want to stay here any longer and turned to leave. Wait a minute. A soft voice suddenly came from behind. Li Xian turned around and saw the woman called Shin Su walking out of the Shin mansion. Shin Shu once said that Shin Su was his sister. That day in the palace, Shin Su did say that Shin Shu was her brother. So, they were all lying to him? You. Come with me. Shin Su looked at him and walked to the side. Li Xian followed her and asked coldly, There is no one called Shin Shu in your Shin mansion? No. Shin Su shook her head and said. A trace of anger appeared on Li Xian's face and he asked, Then you said before? Shin Su suddenly looked back at him and asked, Has anyone ever said that you are stupid? Li Xian thought about it and said, No. Li Yi only said that he was stupid, but stupid was not stupid. Shin Su looked at him and said, You are not only stupid but also blind. In this world there was only one person who dared to point at his nose and scold him. As the ruler of a country, how could he allow a woman to insult him? Li Xian pointed at her and was stunned. His entire body suddenly trembled and his expression changed. He looked at her in disbelief and stammered, You. Shin Su looked at him and said in the same low and magnetic voice, That's right, I am my brother, Morning Dew Hall. Hold the sword firmly and maintain this position for a quarter of an hour. Emingzu held Shaning's hand and adjusted her standing position before walking back into the hall. A few officials of the court had been waiting for her for a long time. A middle-aged official cupped his hands and said, Your Highness, the drought in the south. Emingzu waved her hand and said, Regarding the drought in the south, the Minister of Books will first discuss the specific plan and then submit it. This. The middle-aged official was stunned. He raised his head and looked at her in confusion. It had always been that when the subordinates encountered a problem that they could not solve, they would submit it to Her Highness and there would soon be a solution. This was the first time he had seen Her Highness fight a problem again. The salary that the court gives you is not for you to submit it whenever you encounter a problem. Emingzu looked at him and said, You are the pillars of the court. It is up to you to deal with the affairs of the country. If you submit it whenever you encounter a problem, who will you submit it to when I am not around? Not long after, a few officials walked out of the Morning Dew Hall dejectedly. Her Highness the Princess was half the owner of the court. Since His Majesty neglected the court, the affairs of the country would naturally be handed over to her. How could she not be around in the future, as an assistant princess? Where else could she go if she was not in the palace? Chapter 994. It was the 5th year and 7th month of Jianghu. After the powerful Jianghu of Silla, who was deeply trusted by His Majesty, left the capital city, the pressure on the officials in the court decreased a lot, but the pressure on their bodies increased. Because Her Highness ordered that each department in the court could only submit one memorial a day. This meant that from now on they could not submit all the problems they encountered. They had to solve most of the problems themselves. After discussion, the most difficult and important problems were left to the princess to decide. This was not a good thing for the officials in the court who were used to sitting back and enjoying the fruits of others' labor. Those who did not do anything immediately felt the pressure. The monthly performance evaluation determined whether their promotion would be smooth or not. Now that the Emingzu Academy had been officially opened, it meant that a large number of talents would enter the court in the future. Being in the court was like rowing a boat against the current. If they did not move forward, they would fall behind. However, comparatively speaking, their luck could be considered good. The guy who had just been demoted to Shuzhou to be the provincial governor of Shuzhou was really unlucky. Although he was demoted, Shuzhou was relatively remote, poor, rampant with bandits and poor public security. But apart from these, he had no other shortcomings. After all, he was a provincial governor of a province. At least in the territory of Shuzhou, he was a steady leader. But this time, His Majesty made Shuzhou the fief of Jianghu of Silla. The finance, military and political affairs of Shuzhou were all handed over to His Majesty. The provincial governor, who had just arrived in Shuzhou, was summoned back urgently. Now he was idle at home without any appointment. Speaking of which, although all the princes in the court had fiefs, it was only in name. They could only enjoy part of the taxes of their fiefs. They had no right to participate in the management of the fiefs. Even the princes who were born in the royal family could not have fiefs, let alone those who were not. In terms of law and reason, His Majesty's action was against the rules. But when His Majesty announced this 2 months ago, few people in the court objected. First, Shuzhou was really a special place. It was remote and bordered the Qi kingdom. The local bandits were a headache for the government. Poor mountains, unruly rivers, unruly people. A place that would only be a burden to the country and would not be able to create any value for the country. So what if it was sealed? As long as they could send away that great deity, it wouldn't matter even if they had to send away another province. At the beginning of the 7th month, the wind was gentle and the sky was clear. When the officials walked out of the palace gate, the red sun was only halfway up in the sky. Although they were tired these days, their hearts were filled with passion and enthusiasm. The border was stable and the court was harmonious. Now the Jing kingdom was truly free of internal and external troubles. This great land was still waiting for them to govern. On top of the palace wall, the girl who had been looking into the distance for the past 2 months stood there as usual. Your Highness, those ladies have all moved into the academy. Many of the nobles and officials in the capital are willing to send their daughters to the academy. We have also selected some intelligent and beautiful ladies from the commoners. Now, there are more than 100 students in the academy. Everything is ready, the girl murmured. She retracted her gaze from afar and nodded. The academy will open tomorrow. In the hall of morning dew, the princess was drunk and dancing. The sword in her hand could not be seen clearly, only a white shadow. At the entrance of the hall, an old woman watched for a long time before turning to Changde and asking, Your Highness, how much longer do you have to take that step? Changde looked at the figure and said slowly, Once you have a clear thought, you will immediately enter the academy. If your heart is troubled, you will waste your life. The old woman glared at him. Speak human language. It depends on fate. In the hall of diligent government, Li Xian finished reading a memorial and looked at the thick stack of documents beside him. He picked up a long letter and read it several times. A yearning expression appeared on his face. After a while, he shook his head and cursed, You have no sense of loyalty. After cursing for a while, he picked up another memorial helplessly. The emperor of the Qi kingdom was seriously ill and could not attend the court. The crown prince was in charge of the country. More than half of the officials in the court supported the third prince, Zhao Yi. The court was in chaos. The Qi kingdom had no time to attend to other matters and had withdrawn its troops from the border. The Qi kingdom withdrew its troops. The Zhao kingdom could not support the emperor alone and withdrew its troops the next day. Within half a year, dozens of rebellions occurred in the Wu kingdom. The court could not cope with them and was in a stalemate with the rebels. In the Qi kingdom. In the East Palace. A furious young man swept all the memorials on the table to the ground and cursed, What do they want? The Crown Prince of Ai was personally appointed by Imperial Father. They don't recognize him. Why do they not recognize him? Do they want to rebel? A counselor immediately stepped forward and said, Your Highness, please calm down. The third prince has not reached the point where he can cover the sky with one hand. Many officials in the court are already fighting for Your Highness. Fighting for? A cold smile appeared on the young man's face. He said, I will remember the names of those people one by one. The East Palace of Ai is not a place where they can come and go as they please. In King Feng's mansion, a young man was engrossed in copying a letter. Someone knocked on the door and walked in. After the young man put down his brush, he bowed and said, Your Highness, the Crown Prince seems to be a little anxious. In the past 2 days, many officials have been visited by him. It doesn't matter. Zhao Yi shook his head and did not continue the young man's words. Instead, he looked out of the window and murmured, Jianghu of Silla? Li Xian, should I say that you are smart or stupid? He turned around and asked, Is there any news from Shu province? The man shook his head and said, I have sent people to keep a close eye on it. So far there is still no news about Jianghu of Silla. Zhao Yi looked out of the window and smiled. Brotherly, I believe that we will meet again, in a shop somewhere in the capital of the Qi kingdom. A burly man walked out of the shop and pointed at several workers. He said, These are all valuable goods. Be careful when carrying them. If they are broken, you can't afford to pay for them even if you sell yourself. After giving such advice, he ran back into the shop and said to a woman in a flattering manner, "Miss, these are new goods from the capital. They were all reserved last month." The woman did not care about the goods at all. She looked at him and asked, "Only goods?" The burly man was stunned. Then he patted his head and said, "I almost forgot. This is a letter from the Lee brothers." After saying that, he took out a letter from his sleeve and handed it to her. The woman opened the letter, and the burly man immediately looked at it. The woman glanced at him and walked into the inner room with the letter. Lin Yong curled his lips and murmured, "It is just a letter. It is not something shameful. Do you have to?" In a state in the Wu kingdom. A general rushed into the tent and said in a deep voice, "Your Highness, urgent news. The spiritual state that we have just conquered has been conquered by the imperial court. General Fan. General Fan has been captured." A young woman in armor stood up and said in a deep voice, "Abandon the spiritual state for now and defend the Yen state. I will send General Zheng as reinforcements." After she made some arrangements, a one-eyed general in the tent stood up and said, "Don't worry, Your Highness. Now that many states are rebelling, the imperial court's forces are scattered. They will focus on defense and will not take the initiative to attack." The woman pondered for a moment and said slowly, "Even so, we have to be careful." Not long after, she walked out of the tent and went to another tent. When she came to the entrance of the tent, she heard noises coming from inside. "I don't care. I don't care. I get headaches every time I read. I don't want to study anymore. I want to go out and play." It was a slightly immature voice. Another voice sounded old. At this moment it said anxiously, "Your Highness, you can't do that. You will inherit the throne in the future. You can't lose your ambition in playing games. Do you know that Prince Jin of the Jing Kingdom is younger than you? He can already rule an academy by himself. He is already the pillar of the imperial court of the Jing Kingdom. You must learn from him," the young voice said stubbornly. "I don't care about Prince Jin. I want to play." The woman opened the tent curtain and walked in. With a dark face she said, "Yang Fu." Seeing her come in, the young man in the tent changed his expression and hid behind an old man. "Your Highness, this old official greets you." The old man bowed to the woman. "Prime Minister, you don't have to be so polite." The woman hurriedly helped him up. She looked at the young man and said, "If he is disobedient, the Prime Minister can punish him severely. Don't spoil him every time. Blindly punishing him is not the right way. We should focus on persuading him. Moreover, Your Highness is still young. It's okay for you to play a little." The old man shook his head and said, "But now the Qi Kingdom has the third prince, and the Jing Kingdom is full of talents. Even a woman can take charge of the court, not to mention the young Prince Jin. Your Highness has been in the Jing Kingdom for a long time. You know this better than me." He sighed and said, "I'm just worried that the Wu Kingdom will have no successor." The woman lowered her head and said no more. The Jing Kingdom's royal family was full of talents. The eldest princess, as a woman, showed her great strategy of governing the country. Prince Jin was only 12 years old. When he was 10 years old, he was able to support the Academy of Mathematics. Their current emperor even established the Academy of Sciences, which greatly improved the people's livelihood. The Jing Kingdom's military strength also underwent earth-shaking changes, which deterred other countries. The most important thing was, a familiar face appeared in her mind. Then her face became a little gloomy. Seeing her like that, the young man lowered his head and walked out from behind the old man. He shook her arm and said, "Sister, don't be angry. I'll listen to the Prime Minister and study hard." The woman touched his head and said, "Go play if you want to play." "Thank you, sister." The young man said happily and ran out of the tent. The old man looked out of the tent and shook his head. He sighed and said, "God has not blessed the Wu Kingdom. We have suffered so many disasters. We have to expel the rebels and restore the country." Facing the woman, he slowly knelt down and said in a loud voice, "It's up to Your Highness." Yang Liuqing bent down and helped him up. There was a hint of determination on his face. He said, "Don't worry, Prime Minister. I'll definitely avenge my father and mother. I won't let the people of the Wu Kingdom continue to suffer like this." Shu Prefecture. As the most remote prefecture in the Jing Kingdom, the imperial court had always taken a laissez-faire attitude towards this place. Because Shu Prefecture was so remote and bordered by the three kingdoms, bandits were everywhere. 2 years ago, when the king of Shu was still alive, he plundered the people's wealth. The people of Shu Prefecture had a hard time living there. Now that the king of Shu was gone, another Jianghu of Silla came. Jianghu of Silla's mansion was already under construction. Although the people of Shu Prefecture didn't donate money for this, It seemed like he was not the same kind of person as the king of Shu. However, when the people heard about this Royal Highness Jianghu of Silla for the first time, they still felt very uneasy. In the past 2 years, the number of bandits that came from the fringe to harm the people had decreased. The people of Shu Prefecture were finally living a good life. They didn't want to send away the wolves and tigers and leopards. Strangely enough, the merchants who passed by the fringe had different opinions about the situation in the fringe. Some said that the bandits were extremely vicious, committing all kinds of crimes such as burning, killing and pillaging. Some said that there were kind-hearted bandits. As long as one paid a certain fee, they would escort the merchants out of the fringe. It was no different from hiring a group of reliable guards. In terms of fees, it was even cheaper than hiring a real guard, and the way to tell if one was going to resist the bandits was to see if their leader had hair on his head. At this time, in an unknown mountain in the fringe, a bald man was excitedly rushing into a room with a piece of paper in his hand. He shouted, "Bookworm, bookworm, quick, His Highness has sent me a letter. Read it to me and see what His Highness has to say." "What's the hurry, what's the hurry?" A pale-faced, frail-looking young man glanced at him and took the letter. After reading it, he smiled and said, "His Highness said that they will be arriving at Shu Prefecture soon. He wants us to go over first." The burly man slapped his thigh and laughed heartily. "Since His Highness is coming, our brothers in the League will also be coming. This is great, those bastards. I'll go to their lair and let those little bastards know who's protecting the fringe." When the burly man walked out of the room, a group of people immediately greeted him respectfully. "Greetings, big brother." When this group of people stood together with the burly man, it was as if the world around them had brightened up a little. The burly man waved his hand at the row of bald men in front of him and said, "His Highness is coming. Keep your spirits up and don't embarrass me." The group of people acknowledged and dispersed in all directions. It could be seen that this was a flattened hilltop. The area was large and the ground was paved with bluestone slabs. The houses were arranged in picturesque disorder. Walking along a street to the front, one would find that there were shops, brothels, medical centers, restaurants. Everything that could be found outside could be found here. It was simply a shrunken city in the mountains. In the past 2 years they had captured quite a number of people. When they had nothing to do they would make them repair bridges, pave roads and build houses. Now they had finally made some progress. When His Highness arrives, he should be satisfied. The burly man rubbed his shiny head and smiled. Dozens of miles away, someone's expression was extremely ugly. The man's face was gloomy as he asked, "What did those people say?" A young man raised his head and said, "They said that the other side has quite a number of experts and their strength is not to be underestimated. Unless their queen comes, even if both of us join forces, it will be difficult to gain the upper hand. They suggest that we don't act rashly." The man curled his lips in disdain. "What bullsh *t holy religion, it's just SS. Your Highness, then the man waved his hand. "Let them run wild for a few more days." At the same time, on a mountain adjacent to this place, a man in purple walked into the room. He looked at the young man in the room and asked, "Lord Envoy, what did the Queen say?" "The situation over at the Qi Kingdom is not yet settled. The Queen has no time to attend to them for now." The young man waved his hand and said, "Let's not clash with them for now." The man in purple nodded and asked, "Then how should we explain this to that person? He's just a good-for-nothing. If it weren't for the fact that he might be of some use in the future, why would we have kept him alive until now?" The young man said casually. He got up and walked out of the door and out of the courtyard. In the open space in front of him, a man in yellow took a bite of a bun and frowned. He said, "Who steamed the buns today? Did they beat the salt cellar to death?" He spat a few times and casually threw the bun in a corner. When he turned his head, he noticed a pair of eyes looking at him. Guard. Guard. Sensing the coldness in that gaze, he shivered and quickly ran over. He swallowed the dusty bun and said with a trembling voice, "This bun, it's so delicious." The only teaching of the holy religion was to obey the Queen's orders. The holy religion also had an invisible teaching. Food must not be wasted, especially not in front of the guardian of the right. Disobeying the Queen would only lead to death. Wasting food in front of the guardian of the right would be worse than death. The security of Shu province had improved slightly in the past 2 years. Although it was not the work of the government, the number of merchant caravans that were willing to pass through this place had increased. At this moment, a few horse carriages were slowly driving along the official road into the territory of Shu province. Chapter 995. The carriage stopped next to a tea house on the side of the road. The curtain of the carriage in the front was opened by a slender white hand, and a pretty little girl jumped out of the carriage. The driver jumped out of the carriage and said hurriedly, "Hey, slow down little girl, don't fall. Brother, come down." The little girl landed steadily on the ground and turned back to wave at the carriage. The young man got out of the carriage, held her hand and said, "You've only learned martial arts for a few days but you're already jumping up and down. If you learn for a few more years you'll be like your sister Rui." "Same as me what?" A woman wearing a white tight suit and holding a long sword jumped out of the carriage and looked at him and asked. "Same, excellent." The young man pointed to the tea house in front and said, "Go there and sit for a while, have a cup of tea and then set off. If everything goes well we'll arrive at Yong County today." A few more figures got out of the carriage behind. Li walked over and explained to Rui and the others, "We've been on the road early in the morning. Let's go to the front and rest before we continue." It was a dusty journey from the capital to Suzhou, and it took them 2 months to play all the way. In the following days they were really tired of sitting in the carriage. Whenever they had a chance they would find a place to rest for a while. A middle-aged man came from behind and asked, "Li brothers, are you tired?" Li smiled and said, "We've been on the road for a few hours so I'm a little tired. Why don't we take a rest in the front and I'll treat you guys to a cup of tea." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "I'm also thirsty. Let's go." Then he waved to the people behind him and said, "Leave 2 people to look after the goods. The rest of you rest first. We'll take their place later." The middle-aged man in front of them was surnamed Wang, and he was in the business of escorting goods. They had met him on the road 2 days ago. When they were still 2 days away from Suzhou, Li Yi asked Lu Meng to escort the caravan and the other members of the caravan to Suzhou first. His family, on the other hand, traveled lightly and unhurriedly. Who knew that he would encounter a group of more than 10 bandits that morning? Although he could deal with these people by himself, he happened to meet this brother Wang, who saw injustice and pulled out his sword to help. Before he could do anything he had already chased those people away. After chatting for a while they learned that they were also going to Yong County so they traveled together. Of course, more of the reason was that brother Wang was worried about them traveling alone. Since he had good intentions, Li Yi couldn't refuse so it was not appropriate for him to do it. Of course of it. The middle-aged man patted him on the shoulder and said, "If you ask me, Li brothers are really brave. You dare to go out with your family without any guards. Suzhou is a messy place so be careful. Don't do this again." Of course, Li Yi couldn't say that the guards they brought with them were enough to rush into the palace of any country, kill them all and take down the emperor, otherwise he would have to endure his incessant lecture. There weren't many people in the tea house. Rui and the other women sat in the innermost room, while Li Yi Fong, the sloppy old man, and the others sat outside. Although it was called a tea house it was actually a simple tea shed. The furnishings inside were neat, and the tables, chairs and benches were also very clean. Xiao Chui and Xiao Zhu took their own utensils from the carriage. Along the way they carried things like cups, bowls and chopsticks with them. Li Yi Fong and the sloppy old man weren't so particular. They sat together with the man surnamed Wang and chatted casually. After the man surnamed Wang drank a cup of tea, he opened his mouth and asked, "Li brothers, the capital is thousands of miles away from here. Why did you think of coming to Suzhou when you came out to play?" Li Yi smiled and said, "It's just a random trip." The man surnamed Wang shook his head and said, "To be honest, these days even for us escorts, we have to be on tenterhooks when we walk outside. Our heads are tied to the waists of our trousers and if we're not careful we'll lose them. You guys walked all the way from the capital especially to Suzhou and you're still safe and sound. It's really unbelievable." Li looked at him and said in surprise, "Is Suzhou really that chaotic?" "It's more than chaotic." The man surnamed Wang shook his head and said, "When we go out to escort, we'll always encounter a few waves of bandits, big and small. If it weren't for the fact that these dozen brothers are pretty good at martial arts and have some fame in Suzhou, we definitely wouldn't be able to make a living here." Li looked at him and asked, "There are so many bandits, hasn't the imperial court dealt with them before?" The man surnamed Wang shook his head and said, "Li brothers, you don't know. It's not just bandits. Suzhou is remote, and the imperial court has completely let them go. The bandits who collude with bandits and block the road to rob might have relatives in the government. The entire Suzhou is rotten from the root." Speaking of the current situation in Suzhou, the man surnamed Wang was a little indignant. It should be because he had suffered a lot at the hands of the bandits in Suzhou in the past few years. He sighed and said, "I heard that His Highness Jianghu of Silla is coming to Suzhou. I hope that under his governance Suzhou will be better." Li looked at him and asked, "Brother Wang, have you also heard of Jianghu of Silla?" "Why haven't I heard of him?" The man surnamed Wang looked at him and said, "A few days ago, I also went to the capital. I've long heard that His Highness Jianghu of Silla and the current emperor are close friends. He is also a hero of his generation. He created Tianfa, opened the school of mathematics, repelled the enemy and did many good things for the benefit of the country and the people. What else?" Li looked at him and continued to ask. "It's said that the Jing kingdom can't have such a good situation without His Highness Jianghu of Silla. What else?" "Many people in Shuzhou who have heard of His Highness Jianghu of Silla are looking forward to his arrival. No matter what kind of person he is, it's better than the current situation with a prince." "Anything else?" The man surnamed Wang looked at him and said in surprise, "What else? For example, that Jianghu of Silla is handsome, elegant, and elegant. His martial arts are matchless and he roams the martial world." The man surnamed Wang was startled and shook his head. "That's not true?" Li also shook his head and said, "The information you've gathered is still not complete? Let's not talk about this." The man surnamed Wang shook his head and said, "I'm afraid we'll have to part ways today. If Li brothers continue forward, you must be more careful. It's best if you hire some guards to avoid danger." Fang had only been to Shuzhou once. Hearing this, he asked in surprise, "Are there really that many bandits in this place? Why did we only meet that one?" The man surnamed Wang shook his head and said, "Don't say that. Who hopes to meet bandits?" Fang shook his head with some regret and said, "Maybe we're unlucky." Before he finished speaking, the teacup on the table suddenly shook and ripples appeared on the tea. "Not good." The man surnamed Wang's expression changed. He suddenly stood up from his seat and looked behind him. On the official road, a cloud of dust rose. Dozens of fierce-looking men with weapons in their hands jumped off their horses. The person in the lead quickly walked towards the tea house and pulled a chair over to block the door. He sat down in a grand manner and said loudly, "This is a robbery. Men stand on the right, women stand on the left, and silver is placed in the middle. We only want money, not lives." Chapter 996. As someone who had been traveling for many years, he needed to avoid risks reasonably and also ensure the safety of the goods. He needed to have exceptional judgment. When encountering bandits, whether they could fight them, how to fight them, what losses they would incur, and whether it was worth it, these were all things that he needed to decide immediately. After roughly estimating the number of bandits, the man surnamed Wang concluded that this group of bandits was not something they could afford to provoke. There were at least 50 of them, and it would be too much for the dozen or so people on his side to fight them. As for the Li brothers and his wives, they could not be counted on. He first signaled to the brothers beside him with his eyes, telling them not to act rashly. Then he looked at Li Yi and said, "Li brothers, money is just a worldly possession. Losing money avoids disaster. Life is more important." Fang looked at the bandits outside, his eyes shining. He rubbed his hands together as if he could not wait any longer. The man surnamed Wang hurriedly pressed down on his shoulder and said, "Don't be rash." Although he knew that this brother surnamed Fang had some strength, he could not fight against 10 people alone. He was not a match for these bandits. The location of this tea house was the intersection of 3 official roads. Usually, there was an endless stream of people coming and going. Many people would choose to have a cup of tea here and rest their feet, so there were quite a few customers in the tea house. They did not expect to encounter bandits while drinking tea by the side of the road. Everyone's expression changed greatly, and when they saw the ferocious looks of the group, they could only listen to his orders. The men stood on the right and the women on the left. They took out silver and valuables and placed them on the table in the middle. In a moment, the tea house was immediately divided into 3 groups. One group was naturally the bandits blocking the door, the other group was the obedient customers, and the last group was Li Yi and the others who were sitting peacefully in the tea house drinking tea. After the man with the surname Wang and the others stood up, they realized that Li Yi and the others were still sitting there. Not only that, but the women inside were still whispering to each other. They did not even look in their direction, as if they did not care about these mountain bandits at all. "Brother Fang, Li brothers?" The man surnamed Wang said anxiously and tried to pull Fang up. The bandit leader naturally noticed the 2 tables as well. He looked into the tea house and immediately stood up, his eyes widening. He didn't expect to meet so many rare beauties in this tea house. He quickly walked forward but suddenly heard a pada sound beside his ear. The man surnamed Wang's expression changed. When he pulled Brother Fang up, he didn't pull him up. Instead, he accidentally swept the teacup off the table. Smashing a cup as a signal? The bandit leader stopped in his tracks, walked over and said angrily, "What, you still want to fight?" Fang sat on the stool, shook his head and said, "I didn't want to fight." When he saw this guy actually walking towards the second miss and the eldest miss, he really didn't want to make a move. "You still dare to talk back?" The bandit leader placed his broadsword on Fang's neck in a domineering manner and shouted, "Believe it or not, I will chop you into pieces." This voice was still very powerful, and many of the customers in the tea house immediately turned pale. A chill suddenly came from his neck and Fang shivered. He looked at the bandit leader and said, "Stop it, it's cold." The bandit leader didn't get angry but laughed instead. The broadsword was on his neck and he didn't want his head to fall to the ground, but to actually feel cold. Was this guy stupid? Fang squeezed the blade and said, "Take it away, it's really cold." His broadsword was grabbed by someone, and the bandit leader subconsciously wanted to pull it back, but found that no matter how much strength he used, the broadsword in the big man's hand didn't move at all. Fang gently pulled and the broadsword was in his hand. While the bandit leader was still in a daze, he had already placed the broadsword on his neck. He looked at the bandit leader and asked, "Come, feel for yourself, is it cold?" The bandit leader's face was pale and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He really wanted to say cold, too damn cold. His neck was cold and his heart was even colder, but he was afraid that if he opened his mouth, this sharp broadsword would cut his throat. "Say something." Fang held the broadsword and casually swung it a few times and said unhappily, "Is it cold or not?" A thin line of blood immediately appeared on the bandit leader's neck. "Cold, cold, it's really cold." The bandit leader's voice carried a sobbing tone, and because his throat moved, there were a few more bloodstains on his neck. The atmosphere was a little quiet and then a little awkward. Seeing this scene, the man surnamed Wang doubted his own eyes. From his point of view, it was clear that this bandit had personally delivered the broadsword into Brother Fang's hands. Was he crazy? The people who had obediently handed over the silver and valuables were even more stunned, not understanding the situation. At this moment, a bandit suddenly rushed in from outside, and placed the broadsword on the neck of the old man sitting the furthest away and said loudly, "Release my boss or else you'll kill him?" Fang looked at the unkempt old man who had been captured and said, "Then kill him, I'm not familiar with him anyways." The bandit looked at him and said tremblingly, "You don't think that I won't dare. Are you going to do it or not?" Fang looked at him and as if afraid that the bandit would go back on his word, he swung the broadsword in his hand a few more times, and a few more bloodstains appeared on the bandit leader's neck. The bandit clenched the broadsword and said harshly, "You don't go too far." Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt that his hand was empty. When he looked again, the broadsword in his hand had already fallen into the old man's hand. "I said that I only seek wealth, not lives. You bandits, don't pay attention to that." The unkempt old man shook his head and casually used the back of the broadsword to knock the bandit unconscious, and then he slit his neck, saying, "Also, this broadsword is really cold." Li put down the teacup and said, "Stop playing around, quickly finish this, we still have to hurry on our way." The man surnamed Wang looked at him and did not understand what he meant. Suddenly he felt a gust of wind blow past him, and Brother Fang, who had been standing next to him just a moment ago, had disappeared. He only reacted when he heard clanging sounds from within the group of bandits, and hurriedly turned his head to look. At this moment, of the dozens of bandits, more than 10 had already fallen to the ground. Seeing Brother Fang charge into the crowd like a wild beast, rampaging through the group of bandits, and most of the people he knocked down falling to the ground, the man surnamed Wang completely gaped. A few bandits realized how terrifying this man was, and circled around him from afar, charging towards the women in the innermost area. The man surnamed Wang's expression changed, and just as he was about to stop them, he saw one of the women kick with the tip of her foot, and a long bench directly flew out, smashing into the bodies of those bandits, and sending them flying dozens of feet away. Li stood up and slightly turned his body. With 2 knife-hand strikes he sent 2 charging bandits flying and then kicked another 2. He turned his head and said to Fang, "If we delay any longer we won't be able to reach Yong County tonight." "All right." Fang responded and picked up a large broadsword. The remaining 10 or so bandits were stunned, and the weapons in their hands fell to the ground with clangs. His bare hands were already so terrifying, and with a broadsword, wouldn't that be asking for their lives? "Hero, spare us." The 10 or so bandits threw down their weapons and knelt down with a thud. The man surnamed Wang looked at the tragic scene on the ground and then looked at Brother Fang, the Li brothers, the women sitting inside, the old man sitting calmly at the table drinking tea, and the surrounding bandits wailing and begging for mercy, he stood there in a daze, thinking just what kind of people did they save 2 days ago. Chapter 997. The Li brothers are really good at hiding their strength. When they set off again, the man surnamed Wang looked ashamed and said, 2 days ago I was really showing off in front of an expert. I'm ashamed. Only now did he understand why the other party dared to walk in Shuzhou without a single guard. Just the Fang brothers alone were worth the whole escort agency. After all, in the face of dozens of mountain bandits, they could only put down their weapons and surrender. Not to mention there was also the heroine who could make people tremble with fear with just one move, and the old man who was old but always made people tremble with fear. Even Brother Li himself was extremely skilled. No matter how one looked at it, such a combination did not look like ordinary people. Use more strength, don't be lazy. Hurry up, did you not eat? You, I'm talking about you. What are you looking at? If you look again, I'll dig your eyes out. The escorts sat in the carriage, holding a straw rope in their hands as a whip. From time to time, they whipped the mountain bandits who were pushing the carriage. More mountain bandits followed behind, their hands tied together with a rope. The other end of the rope was tied to the carriage. After chatting for a while, Wang Chang finally couldn't help but ask, what does the Li brothers' family do? Like them, they are also mountain bandits. Mountain bandits? Wang Chang was stunned and shook his head. The Li brothers are joking again. I used to live in places like Qing and Prefecture and the capital, but these places are strictly controlled by the government, so it's not very good to live. Li Yi explained, I heard that there are many mountain bandits in Shuzhou, but the government doesn't care, so I plan to come here to develop. Wang Chang smiled. Of course he didn't believe what he said. Not to mention the gentle appearance of the Li brothers, those women didn't look like mountain bandits at all. He shook his head and didn't care. Then he asked, what are the Li brothers doing in Shuzhou? Are they really here to play? These days no one believed the truth. Li Yi sighed and said, it's true that they are here to play. My family runs a small business. Shuzhou is a special place, not far from the Qi kingdom and the Wu kingdom. I want to come here to see if I can expand my business. Although there were many conflicts between the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom, it didn't affect the business exchanges between the two countries. Every year, many businessmen traveled between the two countries. When he first saw the Li brothers, he knew that they were not ordinary people. Wang Chang thought for a while and reminded him, there are many caravans traveling between the Jing kingdom and the Qi kingdom in Shuzhou. Unfortunately, I have cooperated with 2 of them. Li brothers are new here, so you are not familiar with this place. If you are interested, I can introduce you to 1 or 2 of them. For you, it's much safer and more convenient to join a caravan. Li Yi said politely, thank you, Brother Wang. You're welcome. Wang Chang shook his head and said, however, you can go to the Qi kingdom, but it's better for the Li brothers not to go to the Wu kingdom. Li Yi looked at him and asked in surprise, why? On a horse in front of them, Mississippi Lu slightly tilted her head. Wang Chang explained, the situation in the Wu kingdom is different from that in the Qi kingdom and the Jing kingdom. Although they are not hostile to the businessmen of our Jing kingdom, the Wu kingdom is now rife with rebellions, and the country is in turmoil. No caravan is willing to take the risk to go to the Wu kingdom. It's not worth it to lose your life for money. Li smiled and said, I see. Thank you, Brother Wang. As for Shuzhou, Li Yi had already made arrangements several years ago. Now the brothels had been opened all over Shuzhou, and the Ru family had covered all 7 counties of Shuzhou. A huge information and intelligence network had been established long ago, so he didn't need to introduce the situation in Shuzhou too much. Although the business had just started, it was just a beginning. In the future, the business would be one of the directions of vigorous development. Of course, there were still many things to do before that. Shuzhou was a remote place and the people were poor. Yong County, where the provincial capital was located, was relatively rich but not by much. Therefore, when the exquisite and luxurious carriages drove into the city gate, the people passing by all stopped to watch. Of course, there was another reason why they couldn't move their eyes away. Behind the last carriage there was a long team. Dozens of people were tied with ropes, following behind the carriage. Some passers-by took a few glances and immediately recognized them. They are the mountain bandits in the Black Tiger Ravine area. I recognize them. The one at the front is Scarface Lin. He is the leader of the biggest mountain bandits in the Black Tiger Ravine area. The Scarface Lin is the most insane. Half a year ago, my family's old sow, which was a few days away from giving birth, was ruined by him. How did they get caught? Which hero did this? I didn't expect that this group of people would also end up like this. It's so satisfying. But I heard that Scarface Lin is related to County Magistrate Jiang. Could it be? They originally planned to arrive at Yong County that night, but because of the mountain bandits, their journey was delayed. They rested for a night and arrived at Yong County at noon the next day. The mansion of Jiang of Silla was still under construction. When Li Yi set off from the capital, he sent a letter to them, saying that the incomplete mansion of Jiang of Silla could not be lived in, but the original mansion of the King of Shu had been renovated so they could rest for a while. They had some grudges with the King of Shu before, and now they had to occupy his place, so they felt a little uneasy. But there were so many people in the family, so they needed a bigger place. They couldn't bring Rui and the others to stay in an inn. Before settling down, they had to deal with these mountain bandits first. The government office of Yong County was not far from the city gate. Led by Wang Chong, they soon arrived at the gate of the government office. The bailiff on duty at the gate was leaning against the wall and dozing off. Suddenly he felt his vision go black. He opened his eyes, looked up at the people opposite him and frowned. "You guys, what are you doing?" Wang Chong walked up, cupped his hands and said, "Brother, we caught a few mountain bandits on the way. We didn't dare to deal with them privately, so we brought them to the government office." "Mountain bandits?" The bailiff asked impatiently, looked around and asked, "Where are they? Come out, hurry up." An escort held a rope and pulled the dozens of people out from behind the carriage. The bailiff opened his eyes wide and looked at them, and immediately ran into the government office. When he ran into the door, he stopped, turned around and said, "You wait here, I'll go and ask the county magistrate." The county magistrate of Yong County was surnamed Zhang, and he had just taken office. He had to thank his predecessor for his promotion from the county magistrate to the county magistrate in just a few years. Some time ago, because of the burden of the King of Shu, the previous county magistrate of Yong County, who was also his predecessor, as an accomplice of the King of Shu, was escorted to the capital after the King of Shu fled. Now no one knew where he had been banished to. Therefore, as a county magistrate, he was naturally promoted to the top leader of Yong County. Especially when the new provincial governor was transferred away, and there was no provincial governor in the state capital, he was the absolute ruler here. Speaking of which, he had to thank the King of Shu for refusing to accept gifts. As a county magistrate, he had personally visited the King of Shu several times, but had never met the King of Shu. Perhaps the King of Shu didn't care to recruit a county magistrate at that time. In short, Yong County was his territory now. At this moment he sat in the back hall, took a sip of tea and said with a frown, "Recently the waiter has become more and more immature. He hasn't been here for a whole month." A woman behind him, who was massaging his shoulders, said in a soft voice, "Master, you're wrong about the waiter. You know, it's hard to do business recently. There's a group of bald men who are robbing them, so they can't go home and can only come out to do some small work. I think they're having a hard time, but they definitely didn't forget to show filial piety to you. That's not necessarily." County Magistrate Zhang put down the teacup and said, "Maybe after such a long time he's wild and bold, and has forgotten how he got to where he is today." As soon as he finished speaking, a bailiff ran in a panic and said loudly, "Master, bad news, Second Lin is here." Chapter 998. County Magistrate Zhang was startled by him. He looked at the runner and scolded, "Don't be so flustered. Why are you so flustered?" After the scolding he felt much better. It seemed that Lin Eru was reasonable. He didn't forget the one who dug the well when he was in trouble. Even though he was a bandit, he couldn't forget the one who took him on this road. He looked at the runner and raised his eyebrows. How many things did he bring this time? The runner shook his head and said, "I didn't bring them." "I didn't?" County Magistrate Zhang suddenly pounded the table and said angrily, "Why didn't you bring him here? He was brought here by someone else." The runner said, then immediately shook his head and said, "He was caught by someone else." "What?" Hearing that, County Magistrate Zhang suddenly stood up from the chair. In the front hall of the county government, Wang Chang looked at Li Yi and asked, "Didn't Li brothers say that they still have friends in Shuzhou? Why don't I see them?" Li looked outside and said, "They will be here in a moment." Although they had written a letter a long time ago, they didn't tell them when they would come to Shuzhou. However, Rui and the others had already gone there, so they would come soon. Outside the county government, dozens of bandits were tied together and kneeling on the ground. More than a dozen runners looked at these bandits and then looked inside the hall with a strange expression. Lin Eru and his gang were already considered to be a large group of bandits in Shuzhou. It had to be said that these people were quite capable to be able to catch all the bandits in one fell swoop. But the problem was that Lin Eru was the county magistrate's brother-in-law, not to mention the chaotic land outside Shuzhou, where the government couldn't control. All the bandits who ran amok in Shuzhou had some background. It wasn't that the government didn't want to arrest them. If they were determined to suppress the bandits, none of the bandits would be able to escape. It was just that Shuzhou was too poor. The local officials could only rely on the meager salary of the imperial court to support their families. If they wanted to live a carefree life, they had to go through other irregular channels. The county magistrate didn't care about Scarface Lin because he was not only his brother-in-law, but also often gave him the stolen goods. If these people caught them, it was equivalent to cutting off the county magistrate's source of wealth. Blocking one's way to wealth was like killing one's parents. Would the county magistrate let go of the enemy who killed one's father? As Li Yi and Wang Chang chatted casually, a middle-aged man with a big belly walked out from the back hall. Wang Chang immediately walked over and bowed. This commoner greets the county magistrate. County Magistrate Zhang looked at the bandits outside, then squinted at him and asked, "Did you catch these bandits?" Wang Chang nodded and said, "My lord, we did. To maintain the security of Yong County, we not only rely on the county government, but also on every citizen of Yong County. You did a good job." County Magistrate Zhang nodded and said, "You go first. I'll deal with these bandits." "My lord, then we'll leave first." Wang Chang bowed and turned back saying, "Li brothers, let's go." "You're leaving?" Li Yi looked at the county magistrate in confusion and asked, "Isn't there any reward?" It was not easy to catch dozens of bandits. Even if they didn't have any credit, they had worked hard. The local government had to show some sincerity, but they only gave a verbal reward. This was unreasonable. County Magistrate Zhang looked at the young man who didn't salute to him just now and frowned. After chopping down his money tree, he still wanted a reward. It was already a great blessing that he wasn't thrown into prison. After this incident, Lin Er would have to change his appearance again and use a new bandit name, which was a little more troublesome. County Magistrate Zhang glared at the two nosy guys and ordered the Yamen runners, "Take these thieves away and deal with them later." "Wait." Li Yi looked at him and asked, "May I ask how you're going to deal with these bandits?" County Magistrate Zhang was already angry. Hearing this, his face immediately darkened and he said, "Do I need you to tell me what to do?" He suddenly waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and take them away." After saying that, he walked to the back of the hall on his own. Wang Chang looked at Li Yi with a wry smile and said, "Li brothers, let's go." Li Yi looked at the back of the county magistrate and shook his head without saying anything. The last person who talked to him like this should have grass growing on his grave. But he really didn't have any interest in getting angry with a 7th-level official for such a trivial matter. He would let his subordinates keep an eye on this matter when he went back. "Let's go." He shook his head and walked out of the county government with Wang Chang. At this time, in the back hall of the county government, County Magistrate Zhang looked at the man in front of him with a sullen face and said angrily, "You useless thing. There were so many people but you were still killed." The bandit leader said with a bitter face, "Brother-in-law, you really can't blame me. It's just that they are too powerful." County Magistrate Zhang asked with a sullen face, "Do you know who they are?" "They came to Shuzhou for business." The bandit leader immediately said, "Brother-in-law, I think they are a big fat sheep and there are several beautiful women among them. How about businessmen?" County Magistrate Zhang raised his eyebrows and asked, "Are you sure they are a big fat sheep? They can't get any fatter." The bandit leader nodded his head vigorously and said, "Brother-in-law, you have to believe my eyes. I've seen those women before. Any one of the hairpins on their heads is worth at least 1,000 taels of silver. Last time I snatched one, but it was snatched away by those damned baldies." The bandit leader gritted his teeth and said, "Brother-in-law, we can't let them go." A big fat sheep. County Magistrate Zhang's eyes flashed a few times and he nodded. "We can't let them go for colluding with bandits." He looked out of the door and shouted, "Guards." Immediately, a runner rushed in and bowed. "What's the matter, Your Honor?" County Magistrate Zhang said in a deep voice, "Take people to catch those guys who colluded with bandits just now." At the gate of the county government, Wang Chang looked at Li Yi and said, "Li brothers, we have to go on this trip for another 2 days. Let's talk when I get back to Yong County." Li Yi cupped his hands in return and said, "Be careful on the way." "Let's go." Wang Chang turned around and said to his brothers. Suddenly, a shout came from behind. "Stop." He turned around and saw a dozen or so Yamen runners rushing out of the county office and surrounding them. Wang Chang was stunned and said in surprise, "Brother, this is..." The leading runner waved his hand and said, "Arrest all these guys who colluded with bandits." Colluding with bandits? Wang Chang's face changed and he said in shock, "It's a misunderstanding. Brother, this is definitely a misunderstanding. We caught the bandits. How could we collude with bandits? You still want to quibble?" The runner said sternly, "Arrest them." Fang cracked his knuckles. The imperial court had granted Shuzhou to his son-in-law, so Shuzhou was their territory. How could he let others bully him in his own territory? Li patted him on the shoulder and walked straight into the county government. Seeing that he was so sensible, the runners didn't stop him. They looked at Wang Chang and the others behind and said, "Arrest them." Two runners wanted to go forward and arrest Li, but Fang glared at them. They immediately shivered and retreated. Just now they heard that this man could fight against 10 people alone. They didn't want to suffer such a loss. As long as they didn't run away, they would have time to deal with them later. In the hall of the county government, the county magistrate just now sat in the main seat. He hit the gavel and said loudly, "Lin Er, you said that you have accomplices?" The leader of the bandits knelt in the hall and turned around to point at Li Yi and Wang Chang, saying, "Your Honor, they are my accomplices." Hearing this, Wang Chang's face changed and he immediately said, "Your Honor, he is clearly framing us. If we are his accomplices, why did he arrest them?" The county magistrate also looked at the leader of the bandits angrily and asked, "He is right. If they are your accomplices, why did they arrest you?" "Your Honor, what I said is true." The leader of the bandits said with a serious face, "We were originally accomplices, but we fought because we couldn't divide the booty evenly. He wanted to exchange us for the reward." "Nonsense!" Wang Chang pointed at him and said loudly, "This thief clearly wants to make a false countercharge. Your Honor, please understand." Silence. "It's hard for me to make a conclusion based on your side of the story." Holding the gavel in his hand, County Magistrate Zhang fiercely pounded the table and said, "I won't wrongly accuse any good person, nor will I let any bad person go. Guards, take them all away. I'll interrogate them carefully after I've investigated them thoroughly." Wang Chang hurriedly said, "Your Honor, I can prove my identity." "Shut up." The county magistrate looked at him, waved his hand and said, "Don't talk flowery words. Take them away first." Wang Chang stood where he was in a daze and looked at the county magistrate in disbelief. They were escorts and he had a lot of evidence to prove his identity. It was such a simple matter, but the county magistrate wanted to lock them up first without asking the right and wrong. If they were really locked up, wouldn't it be up to them to decide whether they were right or wrong? He looked at the bandits kneeling on the ground and looking at him with a sarcastic smile, and finally understood something. This was not a county government, it was clearly another den of bandits. This was collusion between officials and bandits. Bandits were officials and officials were bandits. Li Yi knew that there was a problem of collusion between officials and bandits in Shuzhou, which was also the first problem he planned to solve after coming here. However, he didn't expect that he would encounter such a thing as soon as he entered Yong County and had no time to settle down. He was tired after a long journey. What he wanted to do most now was to find a big and soft bed and have a good sleep. These bastards, couldn't they make trouble later? They didn't let him rest at all. They were rushing to reincarnate. Chapter 999. Receiving the county magistrate's order, a group of government runners immediately walked toward Wang Chang and Li Yi. Wang Chang had no hope for the corrupt official, so he said in a deep voice, "Li brothers, it's not like yesterday. This is the government, the territory of the corrupt official. You must be calm and don't be impulsive. It's a big crime to attack the government." Fang stretched his wrists and shook his head, saying, "Brother Wang, you're wrong about one thing. Yesterday it was our territory and today it's still our territory. You can be impulsive. If anything happens, I'll cover for you." Seeing the formation of the man in the court, County Magistrate Zhang's face darkened and he shouted, "Do you want to resist arrest?" The leader of the bandits, Lin Er, was secretly delighted. They openly resisted arrest and provoked the court. Now, no matter whether they were bandits or not, they couldn't escape the crime no matter what. When they were all in prison, he would torture them to death. Fang shook his head, looked at the county magistrate and said, "You dog official, you can't distinguish right from wrong. You even colluded with the bandits. You're too bold." County Magistrate Zhang said with a sullen face, "Take them down first. If they dare to resist, execute them on the spot." He had heard from Lin Air that these people were all skilled and ordinary people were no match for them. Even if all 3 teams of bailiffs were added together, they wouldn't be able to outnumber Lin Air's gang of bandits. But there was a big difference between fighting the bandits and resisting the government. He really didn't believe that these people were really lawless to this extent. 2 government runners walked in the direction of Fong. He clenched his fists, and one of them pulled out a knife from his waist and pointed it at him, saying loudly, "You've heard what our Lord said just now. I advise you to give up the fearless resistance and quickly surrender." Old Fong pinched the tip of his saber and gave it a gentle tug. The long saber flew out of the constable's hand. He pinched the tip of the knife and gently bent it. The tip of the knife was broken off just like that. He broke it a few more times and the long saber was broken into pieces. He threw it on the ground, making a crisp sound. "I have a stomachache. Hold on for a while, I need to go to the toilet." The constable suddenly clutched his stomach, cold sweat beading on his forehead. He bent over and ran away. County Magistrate Zhang's face was gloomy and he said angrily, "Trash, what are you waiting for? Let's go together." Over a dozen government runners glanced at each other, abandoned Li Yi and Wang Chang and rushed towards Fong. It was obvious that this man was the most ferocious opponent. If this terrifying man was dealt with first, the other 2 would not be a threat. Wang Chang's expression changed several times. Finally, he gritted his teeth and shouted, "Brother Fong, let me help you. This F***king world, I'm going to risk it all. Brothers, let's go. At worst, we'll go out to be mountain bandits. It's better than being killed by this dog official." Wang Chang still had some leadership and deterrence among those armed escorts. As soon as he said that, the government runners who had been holding those people suddenly felt their hands were loosened. They looked up and saw those people who had been restrained by them just now looking at them fiercely. The whole county government suddenly fell into chaos. Rebel, you are rebelling." County Magistrate Zhang's face had already turned pale. He shouted, "Go to the provincial governor's mansion to ask for reinforcements." 1 county government, 3 groups of government runners, plus some chore staff, there were no more than 100 people available. Although the number of people was far greater than these rebels, the opponents were all highly skilled in martial arts, especially that man who was simply a beast in human form. More than half of the government runners were defeated by him. In the end, many government runners in the county government of Yong County were surrounded in a circle. They held their heads in their hands and squatted in the yard. County Magistrate Zhang's forehead was covered with cold sweat. He said in a trembling voice, You, do you know what you are doing?" Fong moved a chair over. Li Yi sat at the door of the main hall of the county government and said, "As the county magistrate of Yong County, do you know what you are doing by colluding with the government officials and framing innocent people?" County Magistrate Zhang put on a fierce face. He said, "You are rebelling against the imperial court and the government. I advise you to surrender immediately, or you will be sentenced to death." With a knife in his hand, Fong patted his face and said, "You talk too much. Do you know that the more you talk, the faster you will die? Believe it or not, I will cut off your tongue first." County Magistrate Zhang shrank his body subconsciously. Then he felt that it was a little undignified in public. He raised his head and said, "I am an official appointed by the imperial court, the county magistrate of Yong County." Old Fong looked at him and said angrily, "What are you yelling for? What are you yelling for? You're not an official of the imperial court anymore. If you say another word, I'll cut your tongue out first." As expected, County Magistrate Zhang stopped talking. Compared with his tongue, it was obvious that the latter was more important. After the fight just now, Wang Chang's forehead was covered with sweat, but the expression on his face was quite excited. In his life he had always followed the rules and never dared to go beyond the rules. He had never been as hardy as he was today. After the excitement he quickly calmed down. He looked at Li Yi and immediately said, "Li brothers, we can't stay here for long. We have to leave immediately. The news that we attacked the government office must have been spread out. If the guards are attracted, we won't be able to leave." "Brother Wang, didn't you say that His Highness Jianghu of Silla would be here soon?" Li Yi smiled and said, "His Highness Jianghu of Silla is handsome and unrestrained, and his kung fu is unparalleled. He can distinguish right from wrong." It was too shameless to praise himself. Li Yi coughed a few times and said, "Anyway, you have to believe that His Highness Jianghu of Silla will definitely give us justice." Wang Chang was stunned and immediately said, "But we don't know where His Highness Jianghu of Silla is now." Before he finished his words, the ground under his feet suddenly shook. At the same time, outside the county office, The people all opened their mouths in surprise when they saw hundreds of armored guards surrounding the county office. When a group of soldiers ran into the county office in neat steps, Wang Chang's face turned completely pale. Your Excellency, help me. Seeing the people coming, County Magistrate Jiang directly rolled down from the court. He knelt in front of a man, pointed to the back and said, "These bandits are lawless. They attacked the government office and intended to murder an official of the imperial court. Your Excellency, please take them down." Although the provincial governor of Shuzhou had been transferred away by the imperial court, the assistant officer of the provincial governor's mansion was still there. During this period, the affairs of Shuzhou had been handled by the chief of staff. Therefore, when County Magistrate Jiang saw the chief of staff and the commander-in-chief coming in with the guards, he felt as if he had seen his savior. At this point, the reason why those people attacked the government office was no longer important. What they had committed was treason, and the only way out was death. Wang Chang's body trembled as he watched the soldiers quickly walk over after hearing the words of the young county magistrate. He almost fell to the ground. At this time, two people had already come to them. A scribe on the left quickly tidied up his clothes, bowed and said, "The chief of staff of Shuzhou pays my respect to His Highness Jiang of Silla." A man in armor on the right simply knelt down on one knee and said loudly, "The chief of staff of Shuzhou pays my respect to His Highness Jiang of Silla." In the county office, all the soldiers put down their weapons, knelt down on both knees and said in unison, "We pay our respect to His Highness Jiang of Silla." Wang Chang was stunned and looked back. Where was His Highness Jiang of Silla? Jiang of Silla? Behind him there was no one in the hall. Then he slowly turned his head and looked at the Li brothers, whom he had just known for 2 days and had experienced a lot. Plop. Finally, his legs gave way and he knelt down on the ground. Plop. There was another heavy sound. County Magistrate Jiang had already stood up and turned around to see the chief of staff and the commander-in-chief take down those rebels, but he saw such a scene. The chief of staff bowed and the commander-in-chief knelt down. His Highness Jiang of Silla. Looking at the young man opposite him, he only felt that the clear sky above his head suddenly became gloomy. Dark clouds rolled up and thunder exploded. He knelt down again. There was a buzzing in his ears and his mind was blank. Chapter 1000. An imperial edict had already been sent to Shuzhou. Shuzhou would become the fief of His Highness Jiang of Silla. In the future, all the financial and military affairs of Shuzhou would be decided by His Highness Jiang of Silla. They only needed to report it to the imperial court. The former provincial governor of Shuzhou was recalled by the imperial court, and the other assistant officials stayed. The new provincial governor would be appointed by His Highness Jiang of Silla. This almost made the whole of Shuzhou independent and had very little contact with the imperial court. It could be said to be a pioneering act that had never happened since the founding of the country. Of course, it was also unprecedented in the history of the Jing kingdom that a foreign minister could be conferred the title of king. Based on these 2 points, it could be seen that His Majesty trusted His Highness Jiang of Silla. Shuzhou had a new master, so the local officials naturally had to be more careful. After all, before this they had learned all kinds of legends about His Highness Jiang of Silla. 2 days ago, people from Jiang of Silla's mansion arrived in Shuzhou. These days they had been waiting anxiously. Now that His Highness Jiang of Silla had finally arrived, the ignorant county magistrate of Yong County was so daring. The chief official of Shuzhou and Sima Sheng wanted to tear him apart. The person in front of them was a close friend of His Majesty and Princess Fu Zheng, the powerful His Highness Jiang of Silla. How could he frame Jiang of Silla as a bandit? "Seize this criminal official for me." The chief official of Shuzhou turned around and said. Immediately, soldiers picked up County Magistrate Jiang, who had collapsed on the ground. "Your Highness, please spare my life, please spare my life." County Magistrate Jiang wanted to kneel down, but he couldn't. He could only look at Jiang of Silla with desperate eyes and said loudly, "Your Highness, please spare my life." A county magistrate colluded with a bandit and wantonly framed a good person. It was enough to show how arrogant and corrupt the officials in Shuzhou were. Li waved his hand and said, "Take off his official robes and take him to the market. Whether he will be spared or not, the people will have the final say." The chief clerk of Shu State bowed and said, "Understood. From today onwards, His Highness Jiang of Silla will be the new master of Shu Prefecture. In Shu Prefecture, his words are equivalent to an imperial edict." "Your Highness Jiang of Silla." Wang Chang's face was pale. He walked over and said with a trembling voice, I didn't know your highness's identity. I have offended your highness in the past 2 days. Please forgive me, those who don't know are innocent. Li shook his head and said, I haven't thanked you for your care along the way. Do you have time? I'll treat you to a drink. Hearing this, Wang Chang was stunned. From the beginning, he could no longer treat the young man in front of him as the Li brothers who could drink tea and chat with him. One was just a lowly escort, and the other was the most powerful Jiang of Silla. His Highness Jiang of Silla was actually inviting him to a drink? Old Fang walked over, put his arm around Wang Chang's neck and said, You're like a woman. After drinking this wine, we'll be real friends in the future. If you encounter any difficulties in Shuzhou in the future, I'll protect you. Wang Chang naturally knew that this was a blessing that could not be obtained in several lifetimes. He bowed and said, Then thank you very much, Your Highness Jiang of Silla. County Magistrate Zhang was dragged away. The Minister of Shuzhou walked forward, pointed to the government runners in the yard and asked, Your Highness, how should we deal with these people? The person in charge of the government was County Magistrate Zhang. These people were also following orders, so it was impossible for them to be punished as severely as him. Li thought for a moment and said, Each of them will be flogged 10 times as a punishment. If they do evil again in the future, they will not be forgiven easily. Thank you, Your Highness. Thank you, Your Highness. The government runners immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed like pounding garlic. Even if they would be flogged, they did not dare to resent His Highness Jiang of Silla at all. The others also had time to raise their heads and quietly look at His Highness Jiang of Silla. In the past 2 years they had heard a lot about Jiang of Silla. Today was the first time that they saw this legendary figure. They only felt that although he was so young, he had a bearing that was different from ordinary people. A little girl skipped into the county government. Looking at Li Yi, she said in a crisp voice, Brother, Sister Rui said that if you don't go back, your food will be eaten up by Sister Rui. After saying that, she skipped out again. Li Yi's expression changed. He hurriedly chased after her and said, Ask her to leave some for me. Seeing the figure disappear outside the door in an instant, the people were stunned for a moment. Once again they felt that His Highness Jiang of Silla did have a bearing that was different from ordinary people. The people in Yong County were a little uneasy today. The sergeants guarding the city hurried over and surrounded the county government. Although they did not know what had happened, the situation at that time looked extremely serious. Something big must have happened. It turned out that something big had indeed happened. Otherwise, how could the corrupt county magistrate Zhang be dragged to kneel at the entrance of the food market and attract countless people to watch? The people first felt uneasy and confused. This corrupt county magistrate had been the county magistrate for many years and had done all kinds of bad things. After he was promoted to the county magistrate, he became even worse. He colluded with mountain bandits and extorted the wealth of the people everywhere, which made the people in Yong County anxious and hated him to the core. But he was the county magistrate and no one dared to offend him. The people could only grit their teeth and swallow it. But what was this corrupt county magistrate doing today? Soon, some warm-hearted people inquired about the ins and outs of the matter. His Highness Jiang of Silla, who was widely known in Shuzhou, finally arrived in Yong County today. Before His Highness entered Yong County, he caught a group of mountain bandits and wanted to hand them over to the government. Unexpectedly, the mountain bandit Scarface Lin was the brother-in-law of the county magistrate of Yong County. In the past, they colluded with the government and the bandits and did a lot of evil things. Now they even framed His Highness Jiang of Silla as a bandit. Then County Magistrate Zhang was stripped of his official uniform and hat and knelt here. Bah, corrupt county magistrate, you have done all kinds of bad things. I never thought that you would have such a day. Finally, someone couldn't help but spit at him fiercely. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples, and the onlookers finally became excited. Corrupt county magistrate, how dare you frame His Highness Jiang of Silla? In the crowd, someone threw a rotten egg. You have done all kinds of evil things. You deserve such a day. Another stone was thrown out from the crowd. Damn it, who threw a stone at me? A man jumped out from the opposite side, covering his head. More stones and eggs were thrown at him. The crowd was suddenly in a mess and divided into 2 groups. They began to fight with stones and rotten eggs and finally, it became a close combat. I saw it. It was you who threw it at me just now. A man pointed at the opposite man and kicked County Magistrate Zhang. Don't you know why I threw it at you? Who threw the rotten egg at my head just now? The man pointed at him angrily and punched County Magistrate Zhang in the nose. The crowd rushed over and soon drowned County Magistrate Zhang. Seeing that the situation was not good, The soldiers next to him immediately stepped forward to stop them. When County Magistrate Jiang was dragged out, his head was bleeding, his face was swollen, and he was out of breath. A man in armor changed his expression and immediately said, "Go and get a doctor." The former king of Shu's mansion was now the temporary mansion of Jianghu of Silla. Since they had just arrived in Shuzhou, there were still many things to deal with. After eating, Li Yi did not delay for long. He met some senior managers who had stayed in Shuzhou in the past 2 years. "Your Highness, we have subdued almost all the bandits around us. If we go further in, there are still 2 more difficult to deal with. I am afraid that the loss will be too great, so I dare not act rashly." At this time in front of Li Yi, a shiny bald head was shaking rhythmically. Li Yi nodded and said, "I know what you have done in the past 2 years. You have done a good job. As for the future, we will take our time to think about it." The bald head's face showed excitement and said, "Your Highness, this time we must kill them all?" Wang Chang stood at the door in a daze, only feeling that the bald head inside was particularly familiar. He soon remembered where this sense of familiarity came from. Once when they were escorting a convoy, they encountered a large group of bandits. When the entire escort team was almost destroyed, it was this bald head who saved them. They were also bandits, but they were bandits who specialized in robbing bandits. This bald head appeared here. It seemed that he was a subordinate of His Highness Jianghu of Silla, so it turned out that His Highness Jianghu of Silla did not lie to him. He suddenly felt that his mind was a little confused and needed to be sorted out. Chapter 1001. With our current strength, it's not impossible to unite all the forces in the fringe. But if we fight them head-on, many of our brothers will die. It's not worth it. The bald man named Wang Wei scratched his head. But if we don't expand, there won't be enough people to build roads, bridges and houses. There's no need to rush. Li Yi patted his shoulder, gesturing for him to calm down. To resist foreign aggression, one must first pacify the internal affairs. One must take one step at a time and one must eat one bite at a time. The most important thing at the moment was to put an end to the chaos in Shu province. The bandits in the fringe weren't the priority, but the bandits in Shu province that needed to be dealt with urgently. Because from this day onwards, the entire Shu province was his territory. A mountain can only accommodate one group of bandits. Which bandits would allow other bandits to behave atrociously in their territory? Wang Chang knocked on the door and walked in. He bowed and greeted, "Greetings, Your Highness Jianghu of Silla." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "No need for formalities. Thank you for your hospitality, Your Highness." Wang Chang calmed himself down and said, "The delivery has not arrived yet. I'm here to bid farewell to Your Highness Jianghu of Silla." Wang Wei looked at him and said in surprise, "Hey, have we met somewhere before?" "Thank you, hero, for saving our lives." Wang Chang bowed respectfully and said, 3 months ago, we encountered a group of bandits while escorting the delivery. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid we wouldn't have survived until now." "I seem to have some recollection." Wang Wei scratched his head. Recollection was just a courtesy. In the past 2 years they had saved many people from the bandits. How could they remember every single one of them? Although they were also bandits, they had their own rules. They were not allowed to attack the traveling merchants, nor were they allowed to harm the common people. Since they were not allowed to do this or that, they could only attack their peers. As a result, there were no more small bandits within a radius of several dozen li within their territory. They either banded together to fight against outsiders, or they latched onto the thighs of some large bandit group, making it difficult for them to act against them. This also caused their performance to plummet in the past few months. After thanking the Baldi, Wang Chang suddenly knelt down in front of Li Yi and said, "Wang Chang requests Your Highness Jianghu of Silla to take me in. In the future, I am willing to follow Your Highness' lead. Please get up." Li Yi personally helped him up and said, "Brother Wang has been delivering goods outside all year round, so he should be very familiar with Shuzhou. Maybe he will need your help in the future. If you don't mind, you can work here after this trip." Wang Chang excitedly kowtowed and said loudly, "Thank you, Your Highness." If he could get the protection of His Highness Jianghu of Silla in Shuzhou, as long as he did things honestly in the future, what was there to be afraid of? This escort trip was really worth it. As a newcomer, it was the time when he was most short of manpower. It was certainly a good thing to have the help of someone familiar with Shuzhou. After Wang Chang left, the chief official of Shuzhou came in and bowed. "Your Highness, the county magistrate of Yong County has been seriously injured by the angry people. I have just sent him to the medical center for treatment." Li Yi nodded and said, After the injury is healed, convict him one by one, and then punish him according to the law. Then he looked at him and asked, "What do you think about the management of the bandits in Shuzhou?" The chief official of Shuzhou thought for a moment and said, "Your Highness, Shuzhou is adjacent to the chaotic land. The bandits have been going on for decades. It is hard to imagine that it is difficult to control them comprehensively. In recent years the government has encircled them dozens of times, but every time there is a move they will flee to the chaotic land. When the storm subsides they will come out and continue to commit crimes. We can do nothing." "You mean we're just going to let it go?" "I absolutely don't mean that." Hearing this, the chief official of Shuzhou immediately said, "I just think that this matter involves a lot of things and needs to be considered at length." Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Summon all the officials above the 8th rank in the 7 counties. I want to see them at the Yong County government in 5 days. Although he did not know why His Highness summoned the officials of Shuzhou with such great fanfare, the chief official of Shuzhou immediately bowed and said, "Yes, Your Highness." If he wanted to develop Shuzhou, he had to solve the problem of corrupt officials and bandits first. Li Yi already had a plan in mind. Then he suddenly turned around and picked up Yong Ning, who was quietly approaching him from behind. He gently pinched her nose and said, "You are getting worse and worse. You want to sneak attack me again?" Yong Ning said with some frustration. "I was discovered by my brother again." Recently Yong Ning had been learning martial arts from Mississippi Lu. Of course she was only learning some basic things now. She was young and had strong adaptability. Moreover, she had Mississippi Lu to teach her, and there were 3 supreme masters at home who could consult her at any time. It was likely that when she grew up, there would be another independent heroine in Wulin. Li Yi helped her tidy up her messy hair and said, "You are still too young. When you grow up, your brother won't be able to discover it." Sister Rui also said the same. Yong Ning nodded vigorously and said, "She said that my brother is the laziest and always doesn't practice martial arts. If I work hard to learn martial arts when I grow up, my brother will not be my opponent." A few black lines appeared on Li Yi's forehead. She actually talked bad about him to Yong Ning when he was not there. This Rui was too outrageous. Li Yi looked at her and asked, "What else did she say?" "She also said that when that time comes, I will be able to spank my brother's butt like her." Yong Ning hugged his neck and said, "I can't bear to spank my brother's butt. I want to learn martial arts well so that I can protect my brother in the future." Although Yong Ning was still protecting him as usual, Li Yi had enough vigilance in his heart. Yong Ning was still young and pure like a piece of white paper. What she would become in the future depended on how they smeared this piece of white paper. Li Yi went to smear it carefully himself, so he naturally would not worry. Girls were always likable. In terms of likability, even Li Duan could not compare to her. Drunken Mo taught her how to draw and dance. Ruoqing taught her how to read and play musical instruments. Rui told her stories and treated her like a daughter. They had all added some color to this piece of white paper. However, if Mississippi Lu had to add a few strokes on this piece of paper from time to time, things would not be good. One Lu Rui was enough in the family. There must not be another Rui. Li Yi pinched her little face and said, "Cinny, you must remember to listen to Sister Rui more in the future. Listen to Sister Ruoqing and Sister Drunken Mo more. Also, remember to stay away from Sister Rui." Yong Ning blinked her eyes at him and asked, "Why?" Li Yi looked at her and guided her patiently, "Because Sister Rui always spanked my brother's butt. Anyone who spanked my brother's butt is a bad person." Yong Ning looked at him, then looked behind her and asked, "Sister Rui, is brother right?" Li Yi was stunned. Then he gently flicked her forehead and said, "Little girl, when did you learn to lie? It's wrong to lie. Remember, don't lie in the future." A cold voice came from behind him. "Lying is wrong, but is it right to speak ill of people behind their backs?" Chapter 1002. What bad words? Li Yi turned to look at Mississippi Lu and asked in surprise, "When did you come, Rui?" "Not too early." Mississippi Lu hugged her sword and said, "When you asked Cinny to stay away from me." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "You're kidding. Why would I say something like that? Sister Rui spanked brother's butt." Yong Ning looked at him and reminded, "Brother said that those who spanked others were bad people, so Sister Rui is a bad person? Kids shouldn't listen to what others say." Li Yi looked at her and said seriously, "Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love. The family should love each other. If Cinny is disobedient, Sister Rui will spank Cinny's butt too. That's also a sign of love." Yong Ning immediately covered her butt and took a few steps back. She looked at Mississippi Lu and asked, "Then, Sister Rui spanked brothers but because he was disobedient?" Li thought to himself that kids were so naive. Mississippi Lu spanked him not because he was disobedient, but because he asked for it. Yongning looked at Rui and said pitifully, "Cinny will be obedient." "Sister Rui, please don't spank Cinnies, but okay? Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love?" Mississippi Lu held her sword with one hand and held Li Yi's shoulder with the other. She said, "Let's go over there. Let me love you." Li Yi wanted to move her hand away. He shook his head and said, "There's no need for that. I'm your brother-in-law. It's not good for others to see." No matter how much strength he used, the hand on his shoulder did not move at all. Mississippi Lu smiled and said, "You're welcome. We're a family, so we should love each other. Spanking is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love." Yongning stood where she was and watched the two of them enter another courtyard. She mumbled, "Is Sister Rui spanking brother because she loves him? Your Sister Rui spanked your brothers but not because she loved your brother, but because your brother loved her." Fong, who was squatting at the door, shook his head and looked at her. "You're still young. You'll know these things when you grow up." While Mississippi Lu was doting on Li Yi in the courtyard, the chief officer of Shu province had just entered the provincial governor's mansion. Obviously, as soon as he arrived in Shuzhou, he encountered bandits and saw the collusion between the Yongzhou County magistrate and the bandits. His Highness Jiang of Silla was really angry, and he was determined to eliminate the bandits in Shuzhou. It was good that His Highness Jiang of Silla had such thoughts, but he had been in Shuzhou for many years. No one knew better than him how serious the bandits in Shuzhou were. Not to mention the fact that there were as many bandits as there were hairs on a cow, it would take a lot of manpower and resources to completely eliminate them. He also didn't know if the county magistrates could afford it. Just talking about the collusion between officials and bandits, the yamen was a den of bandits and a protective umbrella for some bandits. This was a huge obstacle to this matter. The various yamens in the 7 counties of Shuzhou were more or less involved in this kind of thing. When His Highness Jiang of Silla issued the decree, the people below responded passively for various reasons. Just like the previous times when they tried to suppress the bandits, it was impossible to achieve any results. His Highness Jiang of Silla would lose face if he failed to suppress the bandits. He might vent his anger on them. There was currently no provincial governor in Shuzhou. As the chief officer, he was temporarily in charge of all affairs. Naturally, he wanted to be promoted to a higher position. If he messed up this first task and angered Jiang of Silla, it would not be a good thing. Putting aside the success of suppressing the bandits for the time being, Her Highness had ordered that all officials of the 7th and 8th rank and above should appear in the Yong County government 5 days later. He had to handle this matter properly. As soon as he entered the magistrate's office, he ordered the advisor who came to greet him, "Send someone to send a message to the other 6 districts immediately. Inform all officials above rank 8 to appear in the Yong County magistrate's office within 4 days. This is an order from King Jing. Anyone who disobeys will be severely punished." The advisor immediately nodded. "Yes, Your Excellency. I will arrange it immediately." In addition to Yong County, there were 6 other counties under the jurisdiction of Shu Province. Because of their remote location, the areas of these counties were much larger than ordinary counties. However, if one rode a fast horse from Yong County to the farthest county, Ji County, it would take them a day to get there. Ji County Yamen. The magistrate of Ji County had just sent off the messenger from Yong County. When he walked back to the Yamen, his expression was a little ugly. This Jiang of Silla had only arrived in Shuzhou for a day. Why did he want to summon everyone? What was he planning? He had just asked the messenger indirectly. This time, Jiang of Silla had summoned all the officials of the 8th rank and above from the 7 counties to discuss the suppression of the bandits. If the bandits in Ji County were really suppressed, he would lose his most important source of income. How would he be able to marry a 7th concubine? "Your Excellency, don't worry. When the king of Shu was still alive, he also suppressed the bandits a few times. Over the years, he has suppressed the bandits many times." Beside him, a man with a goatee said with a smile, "Different situations call for different actions. If they want to suppress the bandits, we just have to cooperate. As for whether or not we can succeed, that will depend on the will of the heavens. You don't know." The magistrate of Ji County shook his head and said, "This Jiang of Silla is not an ordinary person. It's best to be careful. Send someone to tell Lu Huzi to stay put for the time being. It's best if he stays in his nest and doesn't come out. Otherwise, if anything happens, don't blame me for not showing mercy." All right, I will inform him immediately. Also, the magistrate of Ji County thought for a moment and said, make some preparations. I have to leave for Lin County immediately. This time I still have to discuss this with Huang. I will send someone to inform Magistrate Huang first. Go. In a forest somewhere in Ji County, more than a dozen thatched cottages were scattered in picturesque disorder. At this moment, in an empty space in front of the thatched cottages, a man with a big beard looked at his subordinates opposite him and frowned. Look at how scared you all are. It's just a few words from outside and you're already so scared. How much money has that Wei guy taken from us all these years? If we're done for, he'll be done for too. Would he dare to suppress us? But big brother, I heard that this time the authorities are serious. Put your hearts back in your stomachs. We're in the same boat as that Wei guy. Instead of worrying about the authorities suppressing the bandits, we might as well worry about encountering those Baldies again. At the mention of Baldies, some people's faces immediately turned pale. When it came to suppressing bandits, they should be the ones who should be suppressed the most. They were a bunch of immoral beasts. They had no bottom line, so much so that they even robbed their peers. Robbing them once was not enough, and they could still find them even after they moved 3 times. Each time they would rob the entire stronghold clean. It even gave people the feeling that they were the pigs and sheep that were being reared by those Baldies. Every once in a while, they would have to go through that kind of painful experience. The man with the big beard thought about it and said, no, we still have to inform others about this matter. If the authorities want to play, then we'll play with them. The chief clerk of Shuzhou was very reliable. When the 5 days were up, Li Yi arrived at the Yong County government. Of the 7 counties in Shuzhou, except for the county magistrate who was still recuperating from his injuries in prison, none of the officials from the other counties were missing. Greetings, His Highness Jianghu of Silla. As he approached the yamen, the people opposite him immediately bowed to him. Dispense with the formalities. Li Yi waved his hand and asked, do you know why I called all of you here today? The person at the front nodded and bowed. Your Highness, Chief Clerk Zhao has already told us that His Highness Jianghu of Silla has summoned us here because of the bandits in Shuzhou. That's right. Li Yi nodded and said, the bandits in Shuzhou are serious. The bandits are rampant and lawless and the people have no way to live. It should be the responsibility of the local officials like you to clean up the bandits and stabilize the law and order. With the situation in Shuzhou, you are duty-bound. Of course, I summoned you here today not to punish you for your crimes. As soon as these words came out, all the officials present were relieved. They were really afraid that this His Highness Jianghu of Silla would punish them indiscriminately. After all, many people had done this in the past. Now it seemed that His Highness Jianghu of Silla was worthy of Jianghu of Silla. He was so reasonable that it was touching. I can let bygones be bygones, but as the parents of the Shu prefecture, you are paid by the imperial court. You should also take responsibility. Li Yi glanced at the crowd and slowly said, from today on in the territory of Shuzhou, if the property of the people is robbed, all the losses will be compensated by the local officials. When the property is recovered, it will be returned to the local officials to make up for the losses. When the officials heard this, they were all stunned. The local officials will pay for the losses of the people's property first. The officials, will take the blame for the crimes committed by the bandits. Is there such a reason in the world? Is there any law? Chapter 1003. Your Highness this. The expression of an official at the front of the crowd changed. He said, it doesn't make sense for the government to pay for the losses caused by the bandits. County Magistrate Wei's words struck a chord in the hearts of the crowd. Officials could not be bullied like this. How were they supposed to investigate if someone lied about the losses? Even if the commoners really suffered losses due to the bandits, they should not be the ones paying for it. They would not be able to afford it if this dragged on. Most importantly, they could control the bandits they were supporting, but they could not control all the bandits. Li Yi looked at the middle-aged official and asked, you are? The official immediately said, I am County Magistrate Wei Dapeng of Ji County. County Magistrate Wei, do you have a problem with I? I wouldn't dare. The County Magistrate of Ji County panicked. He immediately said, I just feel that the bandits in Shu province are very serious. Although the government is also responsible, there has never been a precedent of officials paying for the losses of the commoners. I'm afraid it's not appropriate. We should consider this matter at length. What do you mean by at length? I think, Li Yi suddenly asked, where is the county magistrate of Ji County? The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then, someone immediately walked out from the crowd and said respectfully, "Your Highness Jianghu of Silla, I am the County Magistrate of Ji County. From now on, you are the County Magistrate of Ji County," Li said to him. He pointed at the County Magistrate of Ji County and said, "Arrest Wei Dapeng. As a County Magistrate, you have been passive in suppressing the bandits. I suspect that you are in cahoots with the bandits of Ji County. You will be dealt with after the investigation." 2 armored guards immediately stepped forward and arrested the County Magistrate of Ji County. The County Magistrate of Ji County was stunned. His expression changed drastically as he immediately said, Your Highness, I have been wrongly accused." "Wrongly accused?" Li looked at the newly promoted County Magistrate of Ji County and asked. "He says he has been wrongly accused. What do you think?" "Your Highness, I don't." The County Magistrate of Ji County thought for a moment and suddenly bowed. "Your Highness Jianghu of Silla, I have a report. The former County Magistrate of Ji County, Wei Dapeng, colluded with the infamous bandit Lu Huzi of Ji County and allowed Lu Huzi and his men to commit crimes in Ji County. They harmed the people of Ji for profit for several years. I have evidence. Please, Your Highness Jianghu of Silla." The Ji County Magistrate's face paled. He pointed at Qin Yi and stammered, "Warriors slandering me?" His voice became softer and softer and his face turned ashen. He did not expect King Jing to act so decisively and take him down at the slightest disagreement. He also did not expect that there would be a traitor by his side who would betray him at such a crucial moment. The County Magistrate of Ji County was quickly taken away. From then on, the County Magistrate of Yong County was no longer as lonely in prison. The County Magistrate of Ji County was quickly taken away. From then on, the County Magistrate of Yong County was no longer as lonely in prison. Li glanced at the crowd and asked, "Does anyone else think what I said was inappropriate?" More than 20 officials looked around. After a moment, they bowed at the same time and said in unison, "Your Highness is wise." The County Magistrate of Ji County had only spoken the truth, but he had been stripped of his official hat and thrown into prison. Who would dare to say anything else? Who would dare to object? Jianghu of Silla was obviously not as kind as he looked. He had only been in Shuzhou for a few days, and 2 county magistrates had already been taken down. Who knew if they would be next? Li shook his head and said, "It's okay. If there are any problems we can discuss them together. Only with discussion can we make progress. Speak freely. I won't blame you." One of the officials thought for a moment and carefully stepped forward. He said, "Your Highness Jianghu of Silla, you are, I." The official subconsciously wanted to answer, but he seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed and he suddenly clutched his stomach. He said, "I have an unbearable stomach ache. Can I go to the toilet first? People have 3 urgent needs." "Go." Li waved his hand and said, "Does anyone else have any objections?" The crowd was silent. If it had not been for what had happened just now, they might have thought that His Highness Jianghu of Silla was reasonable and open-minded. But now they would not fall for such a clumsy trap unless there was something wrong with their brains. One of the officials smiled and said, "Your Highness is wise. I admire you. I have no other objections." Bootlicker disgusting. Behind him, a person looked at him with an extremely disdainful gaze. The person walked forward and bowed, "Your Highness's plan is flawless. This lowly official's admiration for Your Highness is like a surging river, unending. I have no objections." "I have no objections either. Since no one has any objections, then this matter is settled." Li looked at them and said, "You go back to your districts immediately. I will inform you in 2 days as to how to suppress the bandits." Seeing His Highness Jianghu of Silla walking out of the county office, the crowd let out a long sigh of relief. An official suddenly turned around and looked at another person with a bright smile on his face. He said, "Magistrate Zhang, we have been colleagues for so long and haven't had a good gathering. Why don't we go back together? I will hold a banquet at Spring Fragrance House tonight. Magistrate Fong, we haven't had a drink together for a long time. Let's have a good drink today. Lord Go, it's my fault for offending you in the past. I will hold a banquet at home tomorrow. You must do me the honor." On the way back, Fong asked with a puzzled face, "Young master, there are not many good people among these officials. Why don't you kill them all? Why keep them alive?" When Fong was smart, he was like a fox who could see through the world and experience the vicissitudes of life. When he was stupid, he was like a stupid fox. When they first arrived in Shuzhou, the biggest problem they faced was that there was no one they could use. To replace all the officials in Shuzhou was a simple matter for him. But after replacing them, would he let Fang be the county magistrate? These people could pass through layers of selection in the imperial examination and sit in the position of county magistrate. Which one of them did not have some real ability? Moreover, they had been in Shuzhou for many years. No one knew everything about Shuzhou better than them, and no one was more suitable to sit in this position than them. Of course, the premise was that they were obedient. This time, the removal of the county magistrates of Yong County and Ji County should give them peace for a while. In the future, things could be done step by step. They could not be rushed. He looked back at Fang and said, "Go get Wang Wei for me." Not long after, a bald head appeared in front of Li Yi. Wang Wei scratched his head and asked expectantly, "Your Highness, what can I do for you? Don't you need people to repair roads and build houses?" Li Yi thought for a moment and said, "Put the matter of the fringe aside for now. I will leave the bandits in Shuzhou to you this time." Wang Wei was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed in joy, "We can move out on a large scale? Just pick 100 brothers. I will ask the Lu League to help you. This time, none of the bandits in Shuzhou will be left alive. Don't worry, Your Highness." Wang Wei patted his chest, his eyes glowing. "How can we let these small fries mess around in our territory? This time we will rob them along with their money. After feeding them for so long, it's time to pull in the net." Chapter 1004. The county magistrate of Yong County was convicted of colluding with bandits, taking bribes, misappropriating public funds for personal use, and accepting bribes, a total of 18 crimes. He was dismissed from his post, his property confiscated, and sentenced to exile. The county magistrate of Ji County allowed bandits to commit crimes and colluded with officials and bandits. He was also dismissed from his post and detained. His fate would not be any better than that of the county magistrate of Yong County. As soon as the news spread, many people in the two counties applauded and cheered. As the parent officials of the two counties, not only did they not uphold justice for the people, but they colluded with bandits to bring harm to the people, causing unrest in the areas under their jurisdiction. The people were full of complaints. They only had themselves to blame for what happened today. It was also what the people of the two counties had been looking forward to for a long time. All of this was thanks to His Highness Jianghu of Silla, who had just arrived in Shuzhou not long ago. As soon as he arrived in Shuzhou, he arrested 2 corrupt officials in a thunderous manner. He also strictly ordered the local authorities to arrest bandits and maintain law and order, returning Shuzhou to a clear and bright sky. In just 2 short incidents, he had won the love and support of the people of Shuzhou in a very short period of time. Compared to the king of Shu, who only knew how to plunder the wealth of the people and harm the people, Jianghu of Silla was undoubtedly thousands of times better. Even when comparing the two of them, people would feel that it was an insult to His Highness Jianghu of Silla. They were both kings, but why was there such a huge difference between them? They had been looking forward to such a wise ruler for many years. Their days in the future should be much better. The people were in a good mood and their faces were full of smiles. During their leisure time, the topic of conversation would always be His Highness Jianghu of Silla, who was praised by countless people. It was said that he was handsome and had a jade-like appearance. He was one of the most handsome men in the world. It was said that he was brilliant in literature and could speak eloquently. He was recognized as the #1 scholar in the Jing kingdom. It was said that he was skilled in martial arts and was a hero of the world who was skilled in both literature and martial arts. He was refined, humble, and wise. When dealing with bad people, he was decisive, resolute, and merciless. He was His Highness Jianghu of Silla. He was such a noble and pure person. In the private courtyard, Li Yi held Ruoqing's waist and said, "Move a little more. Yes, just like that." Ruoqing's face was red as she bit her rosy lips. The numbness coming from her waist made it difficult for her to calm down. Correcting Ruoqing's movements, he walked over and patted drunk Mo's butt, saying, "You need to perk up a little more here. Practicing martial arts is just like you guys dancing. In addition to practicality, you also pay great attention to aesthetics." Drunk Ink was not as reserved as Ruoqing. When no one was paying attention, she pinched his waist, rolled her eyes at him, and ran to Ruoqing's side. Although he hadn't been able to give her a formal wedding ceremony, they were only one step away from each other. After the new mansion was renovated, it would be time to return what he owed her. Everyone in the Li family practiced martial arts now. Of course, it was different from Mississippi Lu's original intention to pursue the end of martial arts. Yongning wanted to learn martial arts well so that she could protect him in the future. Drunk Mo and Ruoqing wanted to practice martial arts because they heard that practicing that kind of martial arts could delay aging and maintain eternal youth. Few women could resist the temptation of these words. Of course, Li also hoped that they could learn a little martial arts. On the one hand they could protect themselves and on the other hand they could strengthen their bodies and prolong their lives. Their bodies were weak, and he did not expect them to practice martial arts well like Mississippi Lu to bully him every day. As long as they could have some ability to protect themselves and strengthen their physique, Li would be satisfied. Walking to Mississippi Lu's side, he had just raised his hand when she looked over. Li immediately waved his hand and said, "Rui, your movements are very standard. There's no need to correct me at all." Yongning's horse stance was already very stable. She was still at the stage of practicing the basic skills, so her movements were not very standard. Li stood opposite her, made a standard horse stance and said, "Look, horse stance like me." "What do you mean like you?" "Don't lead the children astray." Mississippi Lu walked over from behind, pressed his shoulder and kicked his butt saying, "Press your butt down a little more, a little more." Li rubbed his butt and whispered, "Can you be gentler? Gentler?" Mississippi Lu looked at him and said, "Why don't we go to the yard next door and you tell me how to be gentle?" It was better not to go to the yard next door. It was a public place and people would gossip if they saw it. More importantly, he could not bear Mississippi Lu's gentleness and love. Li shook his head, looked at Yongning and said, "Remember, you have to listen to Sister Rui. Press down a little more." In a small yard, Third Miss Chen poured a cup of tea for him and asked softly, "How are things going recently?" Li nodded and said, "Everything is going well. Some things can't be rushed, so let's take one step at a time." Beating corrupt officials and eliminating bandits was the first step to governing Shuzhou. The fall of the two county magistrates of Yong County and Ji County served as a warning to others. All the government offices in Shuzhou were extremely responsible and serious about suppressing bandits. In a short period of time, the suppression of bandits had achieved remarkable results. A large part of the reason was that the government had gone from indulging the bandits to not indulging them, so a large number of bandits no longer dared to act rashly. In other words, the so-called government and bandits could all be easily dealt with in this way. What came next could not be rushed. The bandits had to be eliminated bit by bit, so they just had to wait patiently. It was just that there were too many chores that needed to be taken care of every day. Everything in Shuzhou required his approval, and he was even busier than when he was in the capital. This was not what he wanted. The position of provincial governor of Shuzhou could not be left empty. He needed to find a capable person to take it, but the problem was that he did not have anyone under him who could be qualified to be a provincial governor. Should he ask Li Xian to send a reliable person over when he wrote a letter next month? "Lift your foot." Chen Chong held a broom in his hand and swept along the way. He glanced at Li Yi and said indifferently, "The third mistress did not ask him to arrange too many servants here." Even the dignified Chen Chong now had to occasionally do some sweeping and desk work. "You have done well on this matter," Chen Chong said casually as he swept. "Most of the bandits in Shuzhou are raised by the government. As long as the government does not condone them, half of the bandits will be gone." He swept his gaze over Li Yi's feet and said, "However, there are still some rules that are not perfect. There have already been a few cases of merchants making false reports of losses. If we do not do anything about it and hold on to the government, it will cause the officials in Shuzhou to panic and have the opposite effect." Li Yi took a sip of tea and asked with interest, "Then what do you think we should do?" "After this incident, the collusion between the government and bandits will no longer exist. We should focus on eliminating the remaining bandits. The officials in Shuzhou cannot bear any more pressure. We should focus on appeasing them. It is impossible that you do not understand the principle of having a stick in one hand and a jujube in the other." "And then?" "When you said govern just now, you have to govern as well as manage. Shuzhou is located in a remote area and is relatively far from the capital, but it is a rare commercial center. Countless merchants from many countries pass through this place. It is a pity that the officials in Shuzhou are blinded by some small profits. Anything else? Its geographical location is blessed by the heavens. If we can eliminate the bandits in Shuzhou, clean up the government and have a long-term vision, attract merchants from all countries to come here, encourage the people to focus on agriculture and promote production. In at most a decade, this place will become the second capital." Li put down his teacup and looked at Chen Chong as if he was looking at a piece of gold covered in dust. As expected, an old fox was an old fox. For him to be able to get to this position, he definitely did not rely on pulling strings. When he thought of this, he realized that Qin Qing from the Qin clan was definitely not someone who was easy to deal with. After all, to be able to get to the position of a servant, it was not possible to rely on pulling strings. Li looked at him and a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Official Qin Chong gripped the broom, a hint of wariness appearing on his face. He asked, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing much, I just want to ask." Li looked at him and asked, "Do you desire power?" Chapter 1005. What power? Qin Chong held the broom in his hand and looked at him. For some reason, when he saw the kind smile on his face, his hair stood on end. The Qin family was once prominent and ranked as a duke. Lord Qin, you were also an official in the Minister of State. You were glorious and had a bright future. Li shook his head and sighed. But now you can only sweep the courtyard with a broom. Have you ever thought? Of course I have thought about it. Qin Chong glanced at him and said, "This is all because of you. The reason the Qin family has fallen to such a state and the reason I have to sweep the courtyard with a broom is all because of you." Li raised his teacup and put it down. He thought for a moment and said, "I'm not talking about who or who. I'm saying, are you really willing to go from being an official in the court to only being able to sweep the courtyard?" "I am willing." Qin Chong poured a cup of hot tea for third young lady Qin and calmly said, "I'm getting old. As long as I can live a stable life, it doesn't matter if I'm an official or sweep the courtyard. In my opinion, sweeping the courtyard is more leisurely." Not thinking about progress, he was not thinking about progress at all. In any case, he had come from the House of Duke and had sat in one of the most popular positions in the court. At his age, his career path was the smoothest and his future was the brightest. He should be the most ambitious and ambitious. Dong Wenyun had already reached the position of prime minister at his age, and yet he only thought about sweeping the courtyard? He only wanted to be leisurely? Degenerate. Although life is full of ups and downs, we cannot forget to struggle. Old steeds are still in the stable and have great ambitions. Martyrs in their twilight years still have great ambitions. Jianghu became prime minister at the age of 80, Sun Wukong went on a pilgrimage to the west at the age of 500, and Bai Suzhen only descended the mountain to fall in love at the age of 1000. Li shook his head and said, "Lord Qin, you are just over 40, not even half of Jiang Taigong's age. How can you be so depressed? I have a position of provincial governor here, 3 levels higher than your previous position. Are you interested?" Although he had a lot of power and could directly participate in national affairs, his official position was not high. He was only a 5th-rank official. The provincial governor of Shu province was a 4th-rank official, which was 3 ranks higher than him. When Shu province was promoted from a lower province to a higher province, his official rank would be unimaginable. Not interested. Qin Chong shook his head, his face expressionless as he picked up his broom and walked into the courtyard. Li stood up and said, "Think about it. I won't consider it," Qin Chong said decisively. "Just take it as helping me out. I'm not helping." Compared to being a provincial governor, I prefer sweeping the courtyard. We're all friends, give me some face. Does His Highness Jiang of Silla still need others to give him face? These were words that went against his heart. When Li Yi had brought up this matter, he had clearly seen the glint in Qin Chong's eyes. How could a person who had lived a glorious life, a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain in court, fall so low that he liked sweeping the courtyard? Qin Chong was undoubtedly the most suitable person for this position. He had the ability and experience. His only flaw was that he had once made a serious political mistake. However, this was not important. He was the great Jiang of Silla, magnanimous and magnanimous. How could he not even have this little bit of tolerance? The problem was that Qin Chong didn't seem to give him much face. Li looked at him and asked, "I'll ask you one last time. Will you accept the position of provincial governor?" "No." Qin Chong turned his head, a mocking smile on his face. So what if it was Jiang of Silla? Even Jiang of Silla would have a time when he would beg him. Li shook his head and indifferently said, "Then don't blame me for being impolite." Qin Chong was disdainful of this. If he didn't want to become provincial governor, could it be that he could suppress him? Li no longer paid attention to Qin Chong. He turned around and looked at third young Miss Qin, saying, "Mother?" Third young Miss Qin smiled and nodded. She raised her head to look at Qin Chong and gently said, "Second brother, Lord Qin, Provincial Governor Qin, I'll go back and issue a decree. You can take up your post tomorrow." On the issue of Shuzhou, Li Xian had given him a lot of freedom. From the position of provincial governor to that of local officials, he didn't need to go through the procedures of the Ministry of Personnel. He looked at the broom in Qin Chang's hand and said, "Of course, if you like sweeping, you can continue this hobby after you become provincial governor. No one will stop you. See you later." Li Yi waved at him again and walked out of the courtyard. Qin Chong threw down the broom and walked to sit beside third young Miss Chen. He poured himself a cup of tea and gulped it down. He said with some dissatisfaction, "Miaoyu, you spoil him too much." Third young Miss Chen smiled and said, "If I don't say anything, how can second brother find a way out of this embarrassing situation?" Qin Chang's face turned red. "Miaoyu, what do you mean by that?" "Nothing. I'm going to take up my post tomorrow. Second brother should make some preparations." She stood up with a smile and said, "I'm going to see my precious grandson. The Li family is still lacking in numbers. It would be great if Ruoqing and Zuemo could add 2 more members to the family." She quickly walked out of the courtyard, leaving only Qin Chong sitting there, his face alternating between red and white. In the short span of half a month, the problem of banditry in Shuzhou had been brought under control. Even the local people of Shuzhou would not believe such a thing, let alone others. Shuzhou had been plagued by banditry for decades. The previous provincial governor had dealt with it, the previous provincial governor had dealt with it, and the previous provincial governor had dealt with it. Even that good-for-nothing king of Shu had symbolically dealt with it twice. But in the past few decades, no matter what the government did or what measures they took, it was only a temporary achievement. The effect was very small, and it could not be compared to the effect of His Highness Jiang of Silla's suppression of banditry. His Highness Jiang of Silla had ordered that if the people suffered losses due to banditry, the local government would pay for it in advance. Everyone knew that in these days the government was a den of banditry. Just this rule alone had eliminated half of the banditry in Shuzhou. Of course, there were also people who took advantage of the situation. A few people with bad intentions took the opportunity to falsely report their losses to the government. After being found out, they were severely beaten dozens of times. They were unanimously spurned by the people, and such things rarely happened again. The situation in Shuzhou had really changed a lot recently. In the past, people in Shuzhou would be in danger of encountering banditry even if they walked on the official road in broad daylight, let alone walking at night. Now, when banditry walked on the mountain road in Shuzhou, they had to worry about whether there were soldiers lying in ambush in the bushes beside them. When they saw pedestrians walking alone, they had to think carefully about whether they were bait thrown out by the government or a hero with unparalleled martial arts skills, using himself as bait and waiting for them to walk into the trap. For a moment, the banditry in Shuzhou was in a state of panic and everyone was in danger. They could not live on like this anymore, in a mountain village in Ji County. A thin man rushed into a room and said to the one-eyed man sitting in a seat in panic, "Big brother, bad news. We've been surrounded." "What?" The one-eyed man immediately stood up and said angrily, "We haven't done business for a few months. Do the government have nothing better to do? Why are they here to cause trouble for us?" The thin man panted and said, "No, it's not the government." "It's not the government?" The one-eyed man sat down again and asked, "Then is it Wang Er Matzi or Li Er Guzi who came to snatch our territory? Did these two F***curs eat bear's heart and leopard's gall?" The thin man patted his chest and said, It's not." The one-eyed man suddenly slammed the table and said angrily, "It's not this and it's not that. Who is it? Finish it all at once." Only then did the thin man calm down and say, It's those baldies." "What?" The one-eyed man stood up from the chair again and quickly fell back down. He asked, What did you say?" The thin man said sadly, "Big brother, those baldies are here again." At that moment, dozens of people were blocking the entrance of the village. A strong bald man held a cone-shaped paper tube in his hand and shouted, "People inside, listen up. You've been surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Don't resist and fight for leniency." Chapter 1006. Big brother, what should we do? In the stronghold, dozens of people surrounded the one-eyed man looking anxious. One of them thought for a moment and immediately said, "Why don't we take the small path behind us?" The one-eyed man shook his head and said in a low voice, "Have you forgotten what happened last time? That small path must be blocked by them now." Many of them trembled when they heard that. Last time, a few of them had tried to sneak away from the small path behind them when those people came in from the front. In the end they were beaten half to death and hung from trees for several hours. Another person gritted his teeth and said, "Then we'll fight them. At most we'll fight to the death." Fight to the death? The one-eyed man looked at him and asked, "Do you think we have the ability to do that? Have you forgotten what happened the last time?" As soon as he said that, everyone's faces showed a look of horror. The last time, which was the first time those Baldies had come, dozens of people from the stronghold had charged at them, but they had been beaten by 3 people until they could not even get up. Their fists and feet were so fast that they could not even see them clearly. The Baldies were not the scary ones but the people they had brought with them. They could not beat them nor could they run away. What else could they do? Wait for death? Don't panic. The one-eyed man said in a low voice, "If they want to rob us, it doesn't depend on what they want but what we have. We haven't opened for business for a few months. Tell me, what else do we have in our stronghold?" As soon as he said that, everyone suddenly understood. That's right. Big Brother is right. We have nothing. What are we afraid of? The market had not been good for the past few months, and they had not even opened for business. In the past month, the government had been suppressing the bandits, so they did not dare to act rashly. Now that the stronghold was about to run out of food, and there was not even rice in the porridge they ate every day, what did they have to be afraid of? Those people could not rob them, but they would not rob them, right? After dealing with them twice and exchanging information with their peers nearby, they already knew that these Baldies were very principled. They only robbed and did not kill. If they obediently handed over their belongings, they would not even hurt them. The stronghold was poor and did not have anything, so they could not be blamed. Big Brother was Big Brother after all. He saw through the essence of the matter at a glance. The bandits immediately felt a sense of respect for the one-eyed man. The one-eyed man looked at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Keep your eyes open later. If anyone causes trouble for me, they will be punished according to the rules of the stronghold. People inside, listen up. You've been surrounded. Put down your weapons and surrender immediately. Don't resist. Fight for leniency." Outside the village, a Baldi looked at another Baldi who was holding a paper tube and said enviously, "You've been shouting for a while. Can you let me shout for a while?" All right. The Baldi handed the paper tube to his companion and shook his head. "Look at your useless look, Lee." Baldi took the paper tube and took a deep breath. Just as he shouted out a single word, the village gate opened from the inside. His face flushed red as he clutched his chest. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. Dozens of bandits stood in 2 rows and walked out of the stronghold. The one-eyed man who was walking in front turned his head and looked behind him. Everyone immediately bowed and said loudly, "Greetings, Big Brothers." The one-eyed man walked in front of the Baldi who was holding the paper tube and said respectfully, "Heroes have arrived. Please come in, please come in." Although they came here to look for trouble, they couldn't hit a smiling person. This person was smiling so brightly. No matter how unhappy he was and how sullen he was, he couldn't make things difficult for him at this time. Baldi glanced at these people and walked into the stronghold with large strides. After everyone walked into the stronghold, he turned his head and looked at the one-eyed man. "Do you know?" Yes, we all know." The one-eyed man nodded his head fiercely. He looked behind him and said, "Why aren't you moving the things out?" One of the bandits immediately ran into the house and carried a bag out, placing it in front of the Baldi. After swallowing back the words he wanted to say twice, the Baldi patted his chest, calmed down and asked, "What is this?" The one-eyed man immediately said, "This is the last bit of food left in the stronghold. If you don't mind, please accept it. We haven't eaten for a few months. Life has been hard. There really isn't anything to show filial piety to you." The Baldi gasped a few times, stared at him and said angrily, "Shut up. From now on you are not allowed to speak." "Why?" The one-eyed man wanted to ask why, but when he saw the Baldi start to turn around and draw his sword, he immediately shut his mouth. At this moment, there were already a few people who came back from patrolling the stronghold. They shook their heads and said, "There really isn't anything. There isn't anything." The Baldi narrowed his eyes at the one-eyed man and said, "Don't we still have them?" Seeing the Baldi's lecherous gaze, the one-eyed man's heart skipped a beat and he subconsciously covered his butt. "Big Brother?" He only said 2 words and the Baldi stared at his mouth with an unfriendly gaze. The one-eyed man was stunned, and the expression on his face became even more horrified. He quickly retracted his hand that was covering his butt and quickly covered his mouth. "Take them away." The Baldi waved his hand. Immediately, someone walked forward and tied up all the bandits, including the one-eyed man, with ropes. The baldy looked back at them and said, "It doesn't matter if you've taken the wrong path. If you turn over a new leaf in the future, you will still have a chance to turn over a new leaf." He walked out of the house, turned back and said, "Move to the next hill." The results of the bandit extermination in Shuzhou were gratifying. The speed and thoroughness of the extermination were unprecedented. Within 2 months, there were no traces of bandits within the borders of Shu province. It was as if the bandits had vanished into thin air, never to be seen by the people again. Some said that they had forsaken evil for good. Some said that they were driven deep into the mountains to be fed to the wolves. Some even said that they had escaped to the fringe and reclaimed their territory. No matter what happened to them, ever since the founding of the Jing kingdom, the banditry that had plagued Shu state for decades had finally been completely eradicated. When he first arrived in Shu state, His Royal Highness King Jing, who was deeply loved and respected by the people, strictly enforced the governance of the officials and eliminated the bandits. He single-handedly opened the curtains to a new era. Deep in the fringe in a mountain somewhere, dozens of houses were scattered all over the place. A man hurriedly ran into one of the houses and said in a panic, "Your Highness, bad news." "Bad news." Inside the house, 2 men were chatting and drinking. The man on the left frowned and looked at him, asking, "What's the matter?" "Your Highness, the people we left in Shuzhou have all been uprooted by the authorities. Not a single one is left." "What?" The man stood up abruptly and blurted out, "How is that possible? Did they find out?" Although he had escaped from Shuzhou back then, he had still left a backup plan there. Many of his subordinates had disguised themselves as bandits, and other than a few trusted aides, no one else knew about this. There were as many bandits in Shuzhou as there were hairs on a cow. How could those people be eliminated? "I don't think so." The servant shook his head and said, "This subordinate has also just found out that the 7 counties of Shuzhou have carried out a thorough bandit extermination a few days ago. In just 2 short months, almost all of the bandits in Shuzhou have been wiped out." "Really?" The man was puzzled. He then turned to look at the man beside him. The man was also puzzled. He murmured, "Impossible. It's impossible that no one reported such a major event." The man looked at him and asked, "When was the last time you came into contact with the believers in Shuzhou?" 3 months ago, the man replied. His expression changed slightly as if he had thought of something. It was almost unheard of to have no contact with the believers for 3 months. To think that the bandit extermination campaign was so thorough. The man beside him had a gloomy expression. He had done bandit extermination before and knew how difficult it was. He asked, "Who is so capable?" The servant raised his head and looked at him. He licked his lips and slowly said, "Jiang of Silla." "Jiang of Silla?" The man was startled. He looked even more puzzled. "Who is Jiang of Silla?" Chapter 1007. Shu Province was the territory of the Jing Kingdom. This Jiang of Silla who came to Shu Province to exterminate bandits was naturally a prince of the Jing Kingdom. However, no matter how hard the king of Shu racked his brains, he could not figure out who this Jiang of Silla was. He knew King Qi, King Xian, King Jin, King Ning. He knew all the princes of the Jing Kingdom, except for this Jiang of Silla. How many years had it been since such a title had appeared? Your Highness." The servant stammered. He raised his head and looked at the king of Shu. "Jiang of Silla. Jiang of Silla is Li Yi." The king of Shu stood rooted to the ground. He looked back at the servant with some difficulty and asked, "What did you just say? Jiang of Silla? Who is Jiang of Silla?" The servant pursed his lips and said, "Your Highness, Jiang of Silla is Li Yi. We live in the depths of the bedlam and do not have access to information. That Li Yi was conferred the title of Jiang of Silla a few months ago." "Jiang of Silla, Jiang of Silla?" The king of Shu revealed a shocked expression. Then he became a little crazy. "Jiang of Silla. What right does he have? What right does he have to be Jiang of Silla? Are all the courtiers dead? Are all the members of the royal family dead? How could they let such a ridiculous thing happen?" The servant panicked and immediately said, "Your Highness, please calm down." After a long time, the king of Shu finally regained his composure. He lowered his voice and asked, "He is already Jiang of Silla. Why did he come to Shu province?" The servant opened his mouth and said, Your Highness, this." The king of Shu looked at him and said furiously, "What are you stuttering about? Speak. The servant lowered his head and slowly said, Shuzhou is the fief of Jianghu of Silla. He has now occupied our former prince's mansion. The first thing he did when he came to Shuzhou was to reorganize the government and vigorously eliminate the bandits in Shuzhou. Shu Prefecture is now his fief, and he even occupied Ai's mansion? The king of Shu fell back onto his chair, staring blankly ahead. Shu Prefecture, that was Shu Prefecture. Not only did Shu Prefecture not belong to the king of Shu, but it had also become the fief of his enemy? He caused him to lose his position as crown prince. He caused him to be like a stray dog. He could only hide in the deep mountains, cut off from news, and face endless pests every day. Wasn't it enough that he caused him to be reduced to this state? Now he even wanted to invade his fief and occupy his prince's mansion. The king of Shu was trembling with anger. His eyes were bloodshot and he clenched his fists tightly. He hissed, Li, I will not live under the same sky as you. Your Highness, I still have some matters to deal with in the church. I'll be leaving first. The youth surnamed Fang glanced at him and left in a hurry after saying that. He had no time to care about the matter between the king of Shu and Li Yi. Although he had quite a grudge with that person, the most important thing at the moment was to find out what had happened to the believers of the holy religion in Shu Prefecture. According to his calculations, the last time the believers of the holy religion came to report, the news that Li Yi had become the Jianghu of Silla should not have reached Shu Prefecture yet. However, 3 months had passed since then. It was impossible for there to be no news of such a major incident in Shu Prefecture. Damn it, what the hell is going on? He cursed and quickly walked out of the courtyard. A man in purple followed closely behind him and asked in a deep voice, Protector, what happened? The youth surnamed Fang said coldly, Who is in charge of the believers in Shu Prefecture? Ask him to come and see me immediately. A moment later, a man in blue knelt in front of him and said in surprise, Protector, I also found something strange about this matter and was about to go to Shu Prefecture to check it out. The bandits in Shu Prefecture had almost been eliminated. Although there were still some that had slipped through the net and it was difficult to catch them all, it was not a big deal. Even the capital could not maintain absolute security. The daily affairs of Shu Prefecture were handled by the newly appointed provincial governor Qin Chong. There was no need for him to worry about everything. In terms of governance, there would not be too many problems in a short period of time. The bandits that had been eliminated in the past few days were all sent to the fringe to pave the way. According to Li Yi's plan, he wanted to completely open up a trade route in the fringe. The Qi kingdom suppressed trade. If the merchants traveling between the two countries passed through the prefectures, they would have to pay exorbitant taxes and various fees every time they reached a destination. It was enough to make them lose all their money. That was why so many merchants were willing to take the risk to pass through the fringe instead of using the official roads of the Qi kingdom. Of course, the premise of all this was to completely solve the problem of chaos in the fringe. This matter had not reached the most urgent point yet, so there was no need to rush it. He had just arrived in Shu Prefecture, so he wanted to spend more time with his family and live a peaceful life for a while. Recently, Mississippi Lu had been busy opening up the new territory of the Lu League. Rui and the others spent their days chatting, playing cards, and doing needlework. There was nothing important to do. Ruoqing was quiet and indifferent, but in fact she could not stay idle. She would get sick if she stayed at home for a long time. Therefore, when she proposed to manage the brothel in Shu Prefecture, Li Yi agreed after a short consideration. He had just sent Ruoqing to the brothel. When he walked out of the room, he saw a young man sweeping the floor in the courtyard with a broom. In this day and age, the person who swept the floor was not necessarily a cleaner. It could be a grandmaster who had nothing better to do. It could also be a provincial governor who held a high position, or a core figure of a religion who controlled countless followers. Li walked over and said, You must be Su Zheng. The young man heard the voice and looked up at him. He did not say anything and lowered his head to continue sweeping the floor. The fact that he did not deny it was equivalent to a direct admission. Li Yi sat down at the stone table in the courtyard and continued to ask, Have you taken over all the followers of the holy religion in Shu Prefecture? The young man said lightly, This is the secret of the holy religion. If you want to know, you can ask the queen. Without the permission of the queen, I will not tell you a word. You have already told me that you are Su Zheng. The young man looked at him and did not say anything this time. Li Yi threw a sign on the table and asked, Can you tell me now? Su Zheng looked up and the expression on his face froze. The blue dragon token. He was very familiar with the holy religion. He recognized at a glance that it was the blue dragon token of the holy religion. It was held by the blue dragon ambassador, whose status was only below the two queens. However, this blue dragon ambassador was elusive. Even his existence was a mystery in the holy religion. But it did not mean that he did not recognize the blue dragon token. The holy church was now split into two. The other side had a concubine and an emissary. They had thought that it would be difficult for them to help the concubine unify the holy church with only one concubine. However, they did not expect that the mysterious left emissary of the green dragon, whose position was even higher than the right emissary, had always been by their side. After coming to his senses, Su Zheng put down the broom and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, left ambassador." Li Yi put away the token and said, "Can you tell me now?" Su Zheng nodded and said, "After coming to Shu Prefecture, I have taken over all the followers of the holy religion here and got a lot of information from them." "Tell me about it." "The other queen is now in the Qi kingdom. She seems to be involved in the fight for the throne. The holy religion is supporting the first prince in the Qi kingdom. But there are more courtiers in the imperial court who are leaning towards the third prince. The situation is grim. The right ambassador has brought a group of core believers to the fringe to recruit bandits to strengthen the holy religion's influence." Su Zheng looked at Li Yi and said, "And there is another unexpected news." Li Yi looked at him and waited for him to continue. Su Zheng continued, "The king of Shu is also in the fringe and has close ties with the holy religion. After the king of Shu escaped, there was no trace of him in the entire Jing kingdom. Li Yi guessed that he must have escaped to the fringe. But he didn't expect him to collude with the holy religion. Is he trying to use this influence to turn the tables?" Su Zheng looked at him and thought for a moment before saying, "To stabilize the followers, I need to borrow the left ambassador's green dragon token." Li Yi casually threw the token to him. Su Zheng paused and said, "There is one more thing. Some of the followers in Shu Prefecture are living in hardship. In order to spread the Queen's grace and help them, we need a lot of silver. You can discuss this matter with her ladyship." Ruoqing was actually the head housekeeper of the family. Although the Li family was a large family with businesses all over the Jing kingdom, Li Yi hadn't seen silver for a long time. Before leaving, Li Yi paused and turned to look at him. He asked, "What is the purpose of all this?" "There is only one queen in the holy religion," Su Zheng looked at him and said solemnly, "to help the queen unify the holy religion." Chapter 1008. Assist the Empress in unifying the holy religion. When Su Zheng said this, his expression was solemn as if he was taking an oath. Li Yi nodded. Comrade Su Zheng was a good comrade, worthy of being put in an important position. After liberation. No, after unification he should be promoted. At the very least he should be given a position as an emissary. Unifying such a large holy religion seemed as difficult as ascending to heaven, but it was actually very simple. Taoist nun was the only obstacle. As long as she was removed, the whole holy religion would be at their fingertips. They were the ones who spread the news that Ruoqing was the Empress of Heaven. Now all the disciples knew that there were two empresses in the holy religion. One of them was actually not the Empress of Heaven. There was only one Empress of Heaven. The previous matter was just a joke that the Empress of Heaven was playing with them. This was a contradiction, a slap to their own faces. A monarch must not joke and the Empress must not joke. If she violated this rule, the Empress would lose her credibility, and the huge force they had painstakingly built would collapse. This was not what Li Yi wanted to see, nor was it what Taoist nun wanted to see. Therefore, the big goal of unifying the holy religion could be replaced by a small goal. Getting rid of that Taoist nun, Su, who had recently gained some enlightenment, was very willing to do this. The only problem was that Taoist nun was far away in the Qi kingdom, so it was not convenient to do it. However, there was no need to be anxious. Li Yi believed that they would meet again one day. He even had a premonition that he and the king of Shu would meet soon. Deep in the land of Bedlam on a certain mountain. Li Yi, are you sent by the heavens to oppose I? This hatred, I and you are absolutely irreconcilable. Several people were standing guard outside the door. When they heard the sounds of dishes shattering and the man's roar coming from inside the house, they all lowered their heads, not daring to speak. Inside the room, the king of Shu's eyes were bloodshot. He smashed all the bowls and plates on the table into smithereens. In the end, he even overturned the table and chairs, waving his fists and legs at the air as if he had gone mad. The throne that was in his hands had flown away, his fief was gone, and now even his manor had been stolen by him. Just what kind of enmity did he have with that Li Yi for him to treat him like this? When he had just arrived in the capital, he had even treated him to a meal. When Fang Yu stepped into the room, the first thing he smelled was the pungent smell of alcohol. He frowned slightly and waved his sleeves. Only then did he feel that the smell had dissipated quite a bit. The king of Shu walked over quickly and said, "Ambassador Fang, you're here. Drink with I." Fang Yu looked at him and said indifferently, "That Li Yi took over Shu Prefecture and your Wang mansion. Don't you want revenge?" The king of Shu spat out all the alcohol in his mouth and said with red eyes, "Why not? I think about it day and night, even in my dreams. If I don't take revenge, I'm not a man." Fang Yu looked at him and said slowly, "That's why I'm here. You have a way to get rid of him?" When the king of Shu heard this, he immediately sobered up. He looked at him and asked with burning eyes. Fang Yu looked at him and said, "Shu Prefecture used to be your territory. You stayed in Yong County for so long. You should know how strong the defense of Yong County is. With the protection of the Jianghu of Silla and Li Yi, it's not enough to stop us." The king of Shu was shocked. "You want to attack Shu Prefecture by force?" Fang Yu shook his head and said, "It's just Yong County." The king of Shu frowned and said, "Although we can indeed shake Yong County if we work together, do you know how many people we'll lose?" Fang Yu nodded and said, "That's why we can't just rely on us." The king of Shu thought for a moment and asked tentatively, "You mean those people, those Baldies?" The Baldies, he mentioned, were the rising stars of the fringe. Of course, although he had been in the fringe for a shorter period of time than them, the Holy Church had been rooted in the fringe for more than a decade. In just 2 years, those people had swept away all the bandits in a radius of dozens of miles. Now, even the forces of the holy religion in the fringe were no match for them. Of course, it wasn't that their strength was completely useless to them. At least, due to their influence, many small groups of bandits had joined them in the past 2 years. This had indirectly strengthened the fringe's strength. In the fringe, it was normal for there to be friction between the major forces. After several confrontations, they had won some and lost some, so they had formed quite a grudge with each other. Fang Yu nodded and said, "They have developed rapidly in the past 2 years. Now, their strength is even greater than ours. If they are willing to help us, it won't take much effort to take down a mere Yong County." "But why do they want to help us?" "That depends on what they want. Silver or men. We'll give them whatever they want." The king of Shu pondered for a moment and his eyes began to shine brighter and brighter. Although those Baldies were detestable, they couldn't be compared to Li Yi. As long as they were willing to cooperate with him, he didn't mind giving them some silver and men. Moreover, the holy religion still had many believers in Shu Prefecture. When the time came, wouldn't that Li Yi fall into his hands? At that time he would definitely make him beg for death but be unable to do so. Fang Yu's eyes flickered and he said slowly, "This matter can't be rushed. Send someone to negotiate with them first and see what they will offer." The king of Shu nodded vigorously and said, "I'll send someone right away." The two talked in secret for a while more before Fang Yu walked out of the room. A man in purple followed behind him. After walking for a long distance, the man asked, "Won't working with this idiot spoil the plan?" "It doesn't matter," Fang Yu said, shaking his head. "He's very familiar with Yong County. Perhaps he'll be of great use when the time comes. However, the most important thing is those people. Go there and negotiate with them." The man in purple nodded and said, "I understand." Fang Yu looked up at the layers of mountains and a trace of darkness appeared between his brows. There was still no news of what had happened to the believers in Shuzhou. Even the people he had sent were like stones sinking into the sea. There was no news at all. Was this Li Yi's doing again? Wang Wei sat in his room and habitually rubbed his bald head. He looked at a similarly bald woman bustling about in the room, serving tea, and a sense of pride welled up in his heart. When he decided to shave his head and come out to roam the world, he swore in his heart that if he didn't make a name for himself, he wouldn't go back to see her. Along the way, he stumbled his way to where he was today. He had thousands of subordinates under his command, and the tigress had become a docile little tiger. He had achieved his original dream and even surpassed it. He became bald, but he also became stronger. His head had become the most conspicuous symbol on his body. There were even countless people who followed his example and shaved their heads. The bald heads formed a beautiful scenery in the fringe. Countless merchants were moved to tears, and countless bandits turned pale at the sight of a bald head. Although he had come this far in a short 2 years, he couldn't be arrogant. So far they had only achieved a little and occupied a small piece of land in the fringe. Their ultimate goal was to unify the fringe, occupy all the mountains, establish a new order and transform the fringe into a new world. He still had to carry out the guiding ideology of, to get rich, build roads first, have more children and plant more trees. He also had to rob more bandits and recruit more people. He couldn't let His Highness down and he definitely couldn't let Big Sis down. Big Sis had given him a chance to realize his value. He wanted to help Big Sis become the king of bandits. Now they still had a long way to go before they could achieve their ultimate goal. At this moment, a young bald man knocked on the door and walked in. He looked at Wang Wei with reverence and said, "Big brother, there are 2 people outside who want to see you." Wang Wei scratched his head and said, "Let them in." Chapter 1009. Outside the room, 2 men stood with their hands by their sides. Ever since they ascended the mountain, their expressions had changed from arrogance to astonishment, then to shock and finally to caution, and even a little fear, because this place was completely different from what they had imagined. Before this, they had looked down on these bald men from the bottom of their hearts. As people who had been steadily fighting in the fringe for more than a decade, overcoming all kinds of difficulties along the way, it was only natural for them to look down on these nouveau riches. They were merely a bunch of nouveau riches with an unstable foundation. Their rapid rise would eventually fade away like a meteor. In the fringe there was no shortage of such things. Moreover, since ancient times, it had always been those with more hair looking down on those with less hair, and those with hair looking down on those without hair. But after ascending the mountain, what they saw completely erased the contemptuous thoughts in their hearts. The top of the hill was flattened, and the ground was paved with blue stone. There were rows upon rows of houses and rows upon rows of shops. Just now they had actually passed by a school. Damn it, they had never heard of a school in a bandit stronghold. What are they learning? How to rob and rob. If these things could be learned, then wouldn't they be able to find the reason why these bald men rose so quickly? Putting everything else aside, just the environment here was more than a level better than theirs. It could even be said that one was in the sky and the other was on the ground. One was a simple thatched hut, and the other was a luxurious wooden hut. One could imagine how comfortable these people slept when they were bitten by mosquitoes in the thatched hut. One was a muddy ground that would turn into a muddy puddle when it rained, while the other was a bluestone street where every stone was about the same size. It was easy to imagine that when they stepped on the muddy water and stuck close to the base of the wall, the rain would make the ground even cleaner on the other side. One was just a temporary place to stay and the other was a city in the mountains. They had a school, shops, medical centers, restaurants and brothels, but their side had nothing. This made the man on the left start to doubt his life. To be able to be a bandit to such an extent really made all his peers blush and feel ashamed. Humans couldn't be compared with each other and even more so with thieves. As for the slightly older man on the right, his expression changed from indifference to solemnity. Among the people he met along the way, there were 3 whom he couldn't see through, and they even gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Experts on the heaven list. The strength of those 3 people was definitely enough to enter the heaven list. In fact, their ranking on the heaven list would not be low. Where on earth did those baldies gather so many martial arts masters? Of course, this was a good thing for them as well, and it was sufficient to greatly increase their chances of accomplishing that great matter. The premise was that they were willing to work together. At this time, a young bald man walked out from a house in front of them and said lightly, "You can go in." The 2 of them walked into the room and the first thing they saw was a man and a woman, both bald. Men were born valiant and women were even more valiant. The bald woman glanced at them and walked out on her own. The older man cupped his hands towards the bald man and said, "Are you Commander Wang?" There was a tinge of respect in his tone. It was respect for the strong. Although the bald man in front of him wasn't strong, he had the power to shake the foundation of the holy religion in the fringe. "That's me." The word Commander Wang made Wang Wei's heart burst with joy. When he looked at the 2 of them again, he immediately felt that they were pleasing to the eye. He glanced at the 2 of them and asked, "Were you sent by that Fang guy?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes." "Did that Fang guy ask you to come over and surrender?" Wang Wei looked at them, nodded and said, "It's not that I want to say this, but you should have done this a long time ago. You also know that with our strength, destroying you is as easy as pinching an ant to death. Since ancient times, a wise man submits to circumstances. These days there have been many bandits who came to surrender. Although you came a little late, you are still tactful. Little six, come, take them to register. The middle-aged man was startled and hurriedly said, No, no, no. Commander Wang, you misunderstand. We are not here to surrender. Not here to surrender? Wang Wei's face hardened and he said angrily, If you are not here to surrender, then why are you looking for me? Do you know that this commander is very busy and has many things to deal with every day? I don't have the time to talk nonsense with you. Next. The middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and said, We are here to do a big business with Commander Wang. Wang Wei shook his head and said, If you want to do business, go find those merchants. We don't do business, we only steal business. The middle-aged man continued, If this business is done, Commander Wang can have as much silver as you want and as many people as you want. Wang Wei stood up and said loudly, Little six, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and serve them tea. They didn't lack silver, but they didn't want what they had. What they lacked the most was manpower, labor. Since they had silver and people, why couldn't they sit down and talk it out? The middle-aged man was finally relieved. He was worried that these people wouldn't listen to him. As long as they wanted something, he was confident that he could complete the task given to him by the protector. Wang Wei looked at them and smiled. He said, Tell me, what kind of big business is it? We will join forces to attack Yong County and capture Jianghu of Silla. The middle-aged man looked at him and said in a deep voice, After attacking Yong County, you can rob as many people and as much silver as you want. We only want Jianghu of Silla. Attack Yong County and capture Jianghu of Silla? Wang Wei gave a look to the young bald man behind the two men. The bald man immediately retreated and closed the door. Wang Wei looked at them and asked, You want to rebel? The middle-aged man looked at him and asked, What Commander Wang is doing now, isn't it also a rebellion? Wang Wei shook his head and said, With just the few of us, we are still far from rebelling. The middle-aged man said, We only plan to attack Yong County, not all the way to the capital. After we are done, we will immediately return here. As long as we enter the land of chaos, we will be invincible. What is there for Commander Wang to worry about? Wang Wei glanced at him and said, In that case, why do we need to cooperate with you? It is just Yong County, we can attack it ourselves. The middle-aged man smiled and said, We have spies in Yong County. When the time comes, we can work together. If it is just you, although you can do it, I think Commander Wang won't be willing to bear the loss, right? So there are spies. Wang Wei thought for a moment and said, Let me think about this. The middle-aged man nodded and said, This is a serious matter. Should be so. However, how long does Commander Wang need to think about it? About an hour. Wang Wei stood up and sent the two out. He said to the young bald-headed man waiting outside the door, Little six, show these two guests around first. Also call the other leaders over. The young bald man nodded and extended his hand to the two men. Two guests this way, please. Chapter 10:10. Not long after, three people pushed open the door to Wang Wei's room. The man walking in front said, I heard that Fang sent someone over. What's going on? We'll talk about this later. Wang Wei looked at his thick hair and felt angry. He waved his hand and took out a deck of poker cards from the drawer. He said, It's not easy to stay here for an hour. Let's play cards. I want to win back all the money I lost last night. The man with thick hair curled his lips and said, You want to win back your money? Don't lose all your wife. Wang Wei snorted coldly. If I dare to lose, do you dare to take it? Thinking of the bald woman with two sledgehammers, the middle-aged man's expression changed. He said repeatedly, I don't dare to take it, I don't dare to take it. You'd better find someone else. 2 hours later, the two of them were led around the place. When they walked back, their emotions were even more turbulent than before. In the land of chaos, one could hear authentic Beijing opera, drink authentic liquor, and eat authentic beggar's chicken. If one could sleep with an authentic girl instead of a trap, how could the land of chaos compare to any prosperous town in the Jing kingdom? When they walked to the door, they saw Wang Wei pushing the door open and walking out. Seeing Wang Wei's gloomy face, the middle-aged man's heart immediately jumped. He asked, Commander Wang, what's your decision? Damn it, I'll cut off my hand if I play cards again. Wang Wei scolded with a sullen face. The middle-aged man was puzzled. What did Commander Wang say? Wang Wei looked at him and said, I said if this deal is done, what do you want? The middle-aged man's heart skipped a beat. He looked at him and asked, Then Commander Wang means, your proposal is very good. We accept. Wang Wei smiled and patted him on the shoulder. He said, "It's a pleasure to work with you." The purple-clothed emissary was finally relieved. He also smiled. "It's a pleasure to work with you." After bidding farewell to the bald men and returning to the stronghold, the purple-clothed emissary saw Envoy Fang and the King of Shu already waiting in the room. "How did it go?" the King of Shu asked. His expression was calm, but the anxiety and expectation in the depths of his eyes could not be concealed. "Fortunately, I didn't fail you." He cupped his hands and bowed to the two, saying, "They agreed to join hands with us to attack Yong County and capture Jianghu of Silla." "All right." The King of Shu turned around abruptly and paced back and forth in the room. He even said the word "good" a few times. His eyes were even more ferocious as he murmured, "Li, oh Li, we will meet soon. I hope you won't be too surprised when the time comes." Fang Yu sat down at the table and asked, "What are their conditions?" The purple-clothed emissary said, "They want us to deliver 500 men to them first, as well as 100,000 taels of silver, before they are willing to join hands with us." If those baldies had agreed so readily, Fang Yu would not have been at ease. He would have been worried that there was a trap. However, after hearing their conditions, he felt much more at ease. Of course, when it came to discussing conditions, it was naturally impossible to make a firm offer. He thought for a while and said, "Tell them that we can only give them 250 men and 50,000 taels of silver. I think this is enough to show our sincerity." They did not lack manpower. In addition to the elites of the holy religion, there were also many bandits who had sought refuge with them in the past 2 years. He did not care about a few hundred people. 50,000 taels of silver was not a small amount. However, he knew that as long as they could conquer Yong County, the return would be 10 times or even 100 times more. Naturally, he could not be stingy with money at this time. The purple-clothed emissary bowed and said, "Yes, I will send someone to reply. There is no hurry for now." Fang Yu shook his head and said, "This back and forth will take up a lot of time. Let's discuss the details first." The purple-clothed emissary nodded. Then he thought of something and said, "When I went there this time, I found one thing. We still underestimated the strength of those people." "Oh?" Fang Yu turned to look at him. "Among those people there are many experts. Some of them even have the strength to enter the heaven list of martial arts experts. If we had fought them head-on, I'm afraid we would have suffered great losses. This is also a good thing?" Fang Yu touched his chin and said, "If we can all join our holy religion, then the fringe will be easily obtained. If we can also use those people in the north, then the strength of our holy religion will also increase by leaps and bounds." Whether it was those baldies or those lunatics in the north, they could not afford to provoke them now. Fang Yu collected his thoughts. The most important thing now was to capture that Jianghu of Silla, Li Yi, and force him to reveal the secret of Tianfa. At the same time, he could also find out what happened to the believers in Shu province. If they could swallow the huge assets of the Li family, they would not have to worry about money in the future. They would be able to recruit more believers, and Her Highness would be very happy. 500 people, 500 mouths. That's too much. But they can't just give us 250. It's inauspicious. Ask them for 10 more people. 100,000 taels of silver, 100,000 means 100,000. Not one copper coin less. If they are willing to cooperate, then cooperate. If not, then scram. In the newly built Jianghu of Silla residence of the Li family in the capital, Li Yi held a piece of paper in his hand. He looked at it and said, "And they asked when you were going to make a move? What do you think about before the new year?" Before the new year, everyone is preparing for the new year and is not very vigilant. It is a good time to make a move. After we succeed, we can still have a fat new year. We should help them to the end. Should we also help them plan their route? After a while, Wang Wei touched his bald head and grinned. "All right, then I will reply to them." After Wang Wei left, Qin Chong walked over and said, "The thing that the King of Shu regrets the most in his life is that meal he treated you to that day." Li did not know whether the King of Shu regretted it or not, but he himself was quite regretful. He had wanted to live a carefree and happy life with his family in the capital. Who would have thought that just a meal would cause him to offend the King of Shu, the Prime Minister's residence, the Cui family, and the King of Shu and the Cui family's many lackeys in the capital? Step by step, he was forced to this road of no return by them. He had to protect himself and move forward all the way. Now, not only could he not turn back, he could only leave the capital and hide in this poor and remote Shuzhou. He even had to temporarily borrow someone else's place to stay. Such a miserable experience made his heart ache just thinking about it. From the moment you entered the capital, I began to pay attention to you. I saw you defeat the Qin family, the Chu family, the king of Shu, the Cui family, and even our Qin family fell at your hands. Qin Chong sized him up and shook his head. I really can't understand how someone as mediocre as Li Minghan could give birth to such a monster of a son like you. Li glanced at him and indifferently said, Provincial Governor Qin, don't you have any shame? Your Qin family has fallen and you're blaming me? I wonder who was it that knelt before the previous emperor and confessed. As if thinking of something, he paused and looked at Qin Chong again. From the moment I entered the capital. Why did you pay attention to me? Qin Chong waved his hand and casually said, Nothing much. I just wanted to see what the young hero that even His Majesty praised endlessly was like. Li looked at him. Is that true? Qin Chong nodded. Every word is true. "260 people will do. It's just 10 more people. Is there a difference? It's just 10 people. It doesn't matter if there are more or less. Don't care about these details." The king of Shu shook his head and asked, What else did they say? Fang Yu continued reading and said, They said that they would choose to make their move during the new year. At that time the other party would not be on high alert, so it would be the easiest to succeed. They even found the most concealed and safest route. That's a good idea. The king of Shu nodded and said, Those Baldies are not stupid. We should take advantage of this time to prepare. Show me the route. Fang Yu handed him a marked map. The king of Shu looked at it and nodded, saying, Not bad. This route is mostly in the mountains and there are no villages. Although it's a little difficult to travel, it's hidden enough. After we leave the mountains we will face the west gate. The west gate is the most dilapidated and the guards are the weakest. If someone cooperates with us and opens the gate in advance, we can go straight in. Seeing this, the king of Shu suddenly slapped the table and said with a smile, These Baldies are quite familiar with the defense of Yong County. It seems that we have found the right people. Behind him, a man nodded in agreement. In the 2 days before the new year, everyone was preparing for the new year. Even the guards guarding the city were not paying attention. It was the time when their vigilance was at its lowest. Even the king of Shu had praised the route they had chosen, so it could not be wrong. Those Baldies were indeed well-educated bandits. They had ideas, insights, and were very considerate and thoughtful. Shu Prefecture was the last inhabited place in the west of the Jing Kingdom. In the hearts of the people of the Jing Kingdom, Shu Prefecture represented remoteness and poverty. Because it was located at the border between the Jing Kingdom and the Qi Kingdom, those who did not know much about Shu Prefecture would always feel uneasy living there, as if the Qi Kingdom could attack them at any time. In fact, this was completely groundless fear. Shu Prefecture was adjacent to the chaotic land and had endless mountains. Even though it was adjacent to the Qi Kingdom, if the Qi Kingdom wanted to use Shu Prefecture as a breakthrough point to attack the Jing Kingdom, the inconvenient transportation would cause the entire army to collapse. This was also the reason why Shu Prefecture had only been plagued by bandits in the past few decades, even though it was adjacent to the Qi Kingdom. Precisely because of this, the city walls of Shu Prefecture did not need to be too high or thick. 20 feet was enough. The government also did not spend extra money to repair the city walls, because it was completely unnecessary. Yong County West City Wall. The western city wall of Yong County was already very dilapidated. Of course, this was only what it looked like from the outside. The walls were made of layers of black soil or loess, and were still very sturdy and durable. Fang did not understand why the son-in-law had come here with him today. This place was dilapidated. Other than the mottled city walls, there were only low-rise houses. There was nothing to see and there was nothing fun to do. Li picked up a branch and casually drew on the ground. Fang looked at it for a while and finally could not help but ask, Son-in-law, what are you drawing? Li pointed around and said, What do you think about building a few shops here? Fang looked around and finally understood what Li was drawing. He carefully squatted down and looked at it again. He shook his head and said, Even if we want to open shops and build workshops, there is no need to build the houses as high as the city walls. Moreover, these shops in a circle will look like an urn. It doesn't look good. Li threw away the branch and said, You don't understand. This is called a business district. A business district, a business district. It has to be in a circle. The son-in-law was rich, so he could do whatever he wanted. He did not care and casually asked, When do you want to build it? I will arrange for people. Start now. It must be completed within 3 months. The shops will open on New Year's Day. Fang was surprised and said, "So urgent? Is it difficult?" "It's not that difficult." Fang shook his head and said, "Just find more people and spend more money. I will arrange it. I guarantee that the task will be completed within 2 months." Li nodded and said, "It's okay to spend more money. It's fine as long as it can be completed earlier. As long as you are happy." Fang shook his head. He did not know what a business district was, but he was sure that the son-in-law only knew some miscellaneous military tactics. He did not know what a barbican was. A barbican, as the name suggested, was a city that looked like an urn. Only important cities would build a small city in a circle around the city gates and build it as high as the city walls. This was so that when a strong enemy invaded, as long as the 2 city gates were closed, the enemy could be trapped. It would be like catching a turtle in a jar. When the time came, the choice of ambushing soldiers in the city or letting the archers shoot arrows, splash boiling oil, or throw stones on the city walls depended entirely on the mood. Shu province was not a strategic location. Why would the son-in-law spend so much effort to build a barbican? Was he worried that the Qi kingdom's army would cross the mountains and attack from here? There was a urn but there was no turtle. Chapter 10-12. The commoners who lived near the western city gate of Yong County discovered a strange matter these few days. Usually there wouldn't be many people passing by. In fact, most of the time the city gates weren't even open. However, there was a huge commotion at the foot of the city walls. At first, they thought that the officials had nothing better to do and wanted to repair the city walls because they had too much money to spend. Later on, they heard that they wanted to build a shopping mall, or something like a business district. They didn't know what exactly a shopping mall or business district was, but they roughly understood the meaning. The newly appointed provincial governor drew a large circle on the western city wall, planning to build a row of shops here. As for why they didn't build on the streets and insisted on surrounding the city gates, they attributed it to the provincial governor having a mental problem. Yong County already had a market square, and it was enough for the commoners to use daily. Why did the provincial governor want to waste manpower and money to build a bigger one? If this wasn't a mental problem, what was? But thinking about it carefully, it couldn't be said to be wasting manpower and money. After all, not only were the commoners not asking for money this time, those who came here to work could even receive 20 copper coins a day. That was 20 copper coins. To the commoners who only relied on farming for a living, it would take them a long time to earn it. This was like a copper coin falling from the sky. Coincidentally, it was the slack season now. If they didn't want to do such a good job, they would be as crazy as the provincial governor. For a period of time, the doorsill of the Yong County government office would be trampled by people every 2 days. The people who came were all commoners who wanted to work on the western city wall. After registering at the government office and being led by a bailiff, they would be able to receive 20 copper coins on the same day. The officials didn't reject any commoners who wanted to work. They would take in as many as they came. There was no helping it. The construction period was tight and the tasks were heavy. Those shops had to be opened before the new year. Right now there were only 3 months before the new year. In other words, they would need at most 2 months to finish the work. Otherwise, from the officials to the bailiffs, everyone would be punished. It was said that this was the idea of the newly appointed provincial governor Qin. The commoners were happy that they could earn money during the slack season, but the officials of Yong County didn't dare to say anything. They could only secretly curse that provincial governor Qin in their hearts. They had seen superiors who liked to cause trouble, but they had never seen one who could cause trouble like this. The officials and bailiffs of the workshops were responsible for supervising the construction of this project. Because they didn't have enough manpower, they had to borrow people from the other branches. Apart from the workers, the officials of the household were also having a hard time. They didn't know what was wrong with provincial governor Qin, but he wanted them to keep all the merchants in Suzhou as much as possible. This wasn't like supervising the construction of a house. Without a silver tongue and perseverance, it was impossible to do this kind of work. A bailiff of the Bureau of Revenue had just sent off a caravan. When he walked back to the city gate, he pursed his lips, which had become dry from talking too much. He couldn't help but curse in a low voice, "Provincial Governor Qin, damn it!" As soon as he raised his head, he saw a guard at the city gate looking at him. He exchanged glances with the guard and shook his head, saying, "Provincial Governor Qin has racked his brains for the sake of the commoners of Shu province. I wonder if his mother's health is good?" Yong County East City Gate. A group of merchants stopped outside the city gates. The leader of the group, a rich man, turned around and said to a bald man behind him, "Brothers, thank you for your help along the way." The bald man waved his hand and said, "There's no need to thank us. If you want to cooperate in the future, you can look for us. You know how to contact us, right?" I know. The rich man nodded and said, "When we return, we will look for you, brothers." The bald man nodded and waved his hand, saying, "All right, see you later. Brothers, have a safe journey." After bidding farewell to the others, the rich man looked at the city gate of Yong County and couldn't help but smile. Ever since the fringe became easier to travel, they had to save a lot of money. According to the merchants they met on the way, the bandits in Shu province had been completely eradicated. They no longer had to worry about all the goods and money they had spent so much effort to travel from the Qi kingdom to Shu province. In the future they could travel boldly on the road to Shu province. From the fringe to Shu province the people were good and the road was good. Whenever he saw the bald man, he would feel a sense of familiarity. This sense of familiarity immediately disappeared when he saw a man in a government uniform walking towards them. They could hide from the kingdom of Qi, but they could not hide from the kingdom of Jing. Shuzhou was a place that they could not avoid. The tariff here was so strict that it was enough to make many small merchants shrink back. "Sir." The rich man smiled apologetically. Just as he was about to speak, the officer quickly walked over with a smile and asked, "Are you merchants from the Qi kingdom?" The rich man's heart skipped a beat when he saw the officer, who had always been cold and expressionless, reveal such a terrifying smile on his face. There must be something wrong with this unusual situation. This officer was smiling so brightly. It seemed that they were in big trouble this time. He was nervous and said, "Sir, hey, don't be so polite. Come in, come in." The officer's smile became even brighter as he led them into the county. The rich man was even more nervous. Whether it was in the Jing kingdom or the Qi kingdom, the government always set up checkpoints to collect taxes. The Qi kingdom severely suppressed business. The tax rate was 2 out of 10. As for what was 2 out of 10, it was also decided by the officials. Therefore, in the Qi kingdom, it was very difficult to do business without an official background. Ever since the reform of the Jing state's tax laws, under the condition that agriculture was stable, merchants weren't suppressed as much as they were in the Qi state. Instead, they were guided and encouraged to a certain extent. Therefore, more and more merchants from the Qi state were willing to do business in the Jing state. Of course, the people of the Qi kingdom in the Jing kingdom was different from the people of the Jing kingdom in the Jing kingdom. Merchants in the Jing kingdom paid 1 out of 20 taxes. They had to pay 1 out of 10 taxes. Of course, it was still more cost-effective than in the Qi kingdom. When they arrived at the official warehouse, the officer gave him a list after checking the goods. He was already used to this process. The list contained the total number of goods and the taxes they had to pay. The officer's attitude just now made him very nervous. He guessed that the tax laws in the Jing kingdom had been changed again. He was afraid that this trip would be in vain. However, when he saw the taxes at the bottom of the list, he couldn't help but be stunned. In the Qi kingdom, the government would value the goods and then convert them into silver. They would deliberately raise the price of the goods to increase the taxes of the merchants. In fact, the government everywhere did this. The only difference was that each was more black-hearted than the other. However, the number written on the list was more than half of what he expected. He had always paid more taxes. This was the first time that he encountered a situation where he paid less taxes. There was a trap, there must be a trap somewhere. Thinking of the officer's attitude, he was even more certain. This was a test. Must be a test. If he was greedy and pretended not to know about this and tried to deceive them, he might lose both his life and money this time. He looked at the officer and said with a serious face, "Your Excellency, we didn't hide any goods. These few carts are all we have. There's no problem with the valuation on the list. But the taxes, Your Excellency, could it be possible that Your Excellency made a mistake in the calculation?" Looking at the officer's expression, he didn't wait for him to speak. He immediately said, "Of course, Your Excellency, please don't misunderstand me. I absolutely didn't mean to criticize Your Excellency. Please don't blame me." Chapter 10:13. Wrong calculation? The officer was stunned. He looked at him, shook his head and said with a smile, "No, the calculation is not wrong. The provincial governor has ordered that from now on, the merchants of the Qi kingdom will be treated the same as those of the Jing kingdom. Your tax will be calculated according to the new system, no more and no less. The wealthy-looking man was rooted to the spot. The merchants of the Qi kingdom will be treated the same as those of the Jing kingdom? Were you kidding? Even if you want to deceive me, you don't need to use such a poor excuse. This is the Jing kingdom. How can the people of the Qi kingdom and the people of the Jing kingdom be treated the same? I'm afraid that they will arrest me for tax evasion as soon as I pay the tax. I haven't been here for half a year, but the officials of Shuzhou have become more and more evil. He looked at the official, his legs went soft and he knelt on the ground with a thud. With snot and tears running down his face, he cried, "Sir, I beg you to let this lowly one go. This lowly one has an 80-year-old mother and an 8-year-old child. If anything happens to this batch of goods, this lowly one's family will have nothing to eat this winter." The officer's eyes were also a little wet when he saw him crying bitterly. He also had an old mother to support, a little child to feed, and a squandering wife to spend money like water. For the sake of his mother's cooking, his child's snacks, and his wife's perfume, for the sake of this month's performance, for the generous bonus, for the sake of a fat new year, he had to clench his teeth and hold on even if he had to talk until his mouth broke. They were all in the same boat. Why should they make things difficult for each other? He helped the merchant of the Qi kingdom up and said seriously, "You don't believe me, right? Come, I'll take you to see the notice. It's written clearly on the notice. If you still don't believe me, I'll take you to see the county magistrate and let him tell you personally. Provincial Governor Qin is really a bastard." The officer cursed in his heart when he led the merchant of the Qi kingdom to see the notice. If it wasn't for the strict order of the provincial governor, he should be sitting at the door of the household and basking in the sun instead of arguing with the merchant of the Qi kingdom here, provincial governor's manner. Qin Chong, who was flipping through the files, suddenly sneezed. Third Miss Qin, who had just left the room, walked back in and reminded him, "The weather is slowly turning cold. Second brother, wear more clothes. Don't catch a cold." Qin Chong put down the file and nodded with a smile. "I understand." At the same time, the low-ranking official led the merchants of the Qi kingdom out of the county yamen. The petty official looked at the merchants of the Qi kingdom and said, "This is Shuzhou. Thanks to His Royal Highness Jianghu of Silla's benevolence, he knows that it's not easy for you to travel far and wide. That's why he gives you such preferential treatment. You won't get such good policies anywhere else. Big brother official, I'm really sorry. I've gauged the heart of a gentleman with my own mean measure." The merchant of the Qi kingdom looked at the official apologetically and apologized. At this moment he finally let out a long sigh of relief in his heart. He even felt a little light under his feet. The fringe was no longer so chaotic. Shuzhou was no longer plagued by bandits. Even the officials of the Jing kingdom treated the merchants as human beings and gave them so much convenience. Wouldn't their business get smoother and smoother in the future? It's a small matter, a small matter. The low-ranking official looked at him and asked, "Where are you going on this trip?" The wealthy-looking man smiled and said, "We're going to Qing and Prefecture first. When the time comes, we'll turn to the water route to the capital and sell these goods. Then we'll buy some things from the Jing kingdom and bring them back to earn some hard-earned money." Many merchants of the Qi kingdom made money in the same way as them. They sold their goods at two different places and earned a price difference. The price difference was not to be underestimated. If they were lucky, the profit from this trip would be enough to make up for 2 whole years of their stay in the Qi kingdom. They were in the cloth business in the Qi kingdom. Relying on the secret dyeing recipes passed down in their family, they had accumulated some family wealth. Initially, their business in the Qi kingdom was doing well. However, ever since the high-grade cloth from the Jing kingdom flowed into the Qi kingdom and started to lead the fashion, their business was greatly affected. Left with no choice, they could only become a traveling merchant. They traveled from the Qi kingdom to the Jing kingdom, passing through prefectures and prefectures. Fortunately, their cloth was unique. Even if they brought it back to the Jing kingdom, it would still be extremely popular. In the Jing kingdom, they also had regular business partners. "It's not easy for you to travel all over the country." The low-ranking official looked at him and said, "Since you'll be leaving in 2 days, it's fate that we've met. Why don't I treat you to a meal?" The merchant of the Qi kingdom looked at the low-ranking official and suddenly felt tears welling up in his eyes. When they were doing business in the Qi kingdom, the officials wanted nothing more than to extract all the oil from their bodies and pay taxes. However, when they were in another country, not only did the government voluntarily help them lower their taxes, the officials even wanted to treat them to a meal. Comparing the two, in the Shu prefecture, he actually felt like he was at home. He sniffed and looked at the low-ranking official. He said solemnly, "Don't thank you for your kindness. I'll treat you to a meal. May I ask which is the best restaurant here?" "How could I?" The low-ranking official shook his head and pointed diagonally across from the yamen. "That's it." The rich man raised his head and saw that diagonally across from the yamen, the words Wuxia restaurant were clearly visible on the plaque. In a private room on the second floor of the Wuxia restaurant, the two men chatted for a long time after 3 rounds of wine. The low-ranking official looked at the rich man and asked, "I heard from Brother Hu that you've come this time to buy cloth and clothing from the Jing kingdom. May I ask, are these things only available in Qing and Prefecture and the capital?" "That's not it." The merchant of the Qi kingdom shook his head and said, "Brother Nye, you don't know this. Although other prefectures sell these things, we need a lot of them. You can only buy them in the capital and Qing and Prefecture." The low-ranking official shook his head and said, "The one who doesn't know is you, Brother Hu. Let me put it this way. Whatever you can buy in Qing and Prefecture and the capital, you can buy it in Shuzhou. Whatever you can't buy in Qing and Prefecture and the capital, you can buy it in Shuzhou." The merchant of the Qi kingdom was stunned. He asked, "Why is that?" "Of course it's because His Highness Jianghu of Silla has come." The low-ranking official waved his hand and said, "Let's eat first. When we're done I'll show you around and you'll know." "All right, Brother Nye, I'll drink to you first." Cheers. After a while, the merchant of the Qi kingdom stood at the western gate and looked at the crowd working in full swing. He asked in astonishment, "Brother Nye, what are you doing? Are you building the city walls?" "This isn't building the city walls." The low-ranking official shook his head and said, "Look, this circle of unbuilt buildings are all shops and workshops. They'll be finished in another 2 months. The higher-ups have said that this will be a shopping mall in the future. There are shops selling cloth, clothes, restaurants, cloth shops and inns." He looked at the merchant of the Qi kingdom and said, "Even you can rent a shop here. There are merchants from all over the world here. If you want to buy something, you don't have to travel all the way from Shuzhou to the capital. Whatever the capital has, you can find here. Is that true?" The eyes of the merchant of the Qi kingdom lit up when he heard this. 4 merchants like them, if they could skip the trip to the capital, they would not only save time and travel expenses, but they would also greatly reduce the risk. If they calculated it carefully, they could save more than half of their expenses. Moreover, time was money. Saving time was making money. The time they had to go to the capital was enough for them to make several trips between Shuzhou and the Qi kingdom. The difference in profits between the two was several times. Not only that, the government of the Jing kingdom also allowed the people of the Qi kingdom to open shops here. From the information he got from Brother Nye, it was obvious that Shuzhou encouraged and supported business. This was rare in other places. It was also a great attraction for merchants from all over the world. If this shopping mall was built with Shuzhou as the center, it would definitely be a place where merchants from the Qi kingdom, Jing kingdom, and Wu kingdom would fight for. If they could open a shop here, it would be like making money sitting on the ground. Chapter 10:14. The merchant's eyes flickered as if he could already see mountains of gold and silver flashing before his eyes. He looked at the petty official and asked, "Big Brother Nye, do you think I can rent a shop here as well?" "First come, first served. You can reserve it after paying the deposit." The petty official looked at him and said, "Today is fine, but in a few days there might not be any space left." The merchant from the Qi kingdom immediately said, "Thank you, Brother Nye. Where can I pay the deposit?" "I'll go now." The petty official waved his hand and said, "No need to thank me. It's all because of the good policies." The merchant from the Qi kingdom shook his head repeatedly. "If not for you, Brother Nye, I would already be on my way to the capital. How could I encounter such a good thing? After paying the deposit, I'll reward you handsomely." There were still a few more to go for this month's sales. The petty official thought for a moment and said, "If you really want to thank me, introduce some of your merchant friends to me." After paying the deposit, the merchant from the Qi kingdom came out from the registration area of the yamen. Once again he bowed respectfully to the petty official and said seriously, "I can't thank you enough. If Brother Nye needs anything in the future, please don't hesitate to ask. I won't refuse." "You're too kind." The petty official waved his hand and said, "Don't you want to buy cloth? I'll take you to the cloth workshop. I heard that the cloth workshop in the capital is the same one in our Shuzhou. Take a look first." The merchant from the Qi kingdom cupped his hands and said, all right. I'll have to trouble Brother Nye again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly heard the sound of an argument. That's clearly my customer. How dare you fight with me? What do you mean by your customer? Who told you to walk so slowly? Your sales for this month are enough. Can't you let me have one? Who wouldn't want to live with money? The merchant from the Qi kingdom watched as the two yamen runners dragged each other into the yamen. He looked at the petty official and asked, Brother Nye, this is. The petty official waved his hand and said, Don't worry about them. Let's go on our. Although it was the slack season for farming, the people of Yong County were living quite a fulfilling life. Every day before dawn, the strong men in the village would form groups of 5 or 10 and go to the prefectural city to build houses. At noon they would be provided with a meal of noodles. Once they were full they would return at night. Their wages would be 20 copper coins a day, paid on a daily basis. They couldn't even earn 20 copper coins a day from farming. They didn't have any other skills, but they had plenty of physical strength. They could earn 20 copper coins a day, and every few days they could still make up their minds to buy a pot of wine and 2 taels of meat to eat. Wu Laosan was one of them. The reason why he was called Wu Laosan was that he was the third child in his family. He had 2 older brothers before him. One died not long after he was born, and the other was killed by bandits more than 10 years ago. He was the only one left in the old Wu family. Thinking of this, he felt that it was a pity. Second brother didn't have the luck to die early. Otherwise, he would have been able to witness this world without thieves. His Highness Jianghu of Silla was the best. He did such a great thing for the people of Shuzhou. It was just that he wasn't a good judge of character. He found a provincial governor who was sick in the head. He built shops at the city gate, and he even built them in a circle. But thinking about it carefully, if this provincial governor was normal, he wouldn't earn 20 copper coins a day, and he wouldn't have the money to buy candied fruits from Su Fuji for his wife. Therefore he found a provincial governor who was sick in the head. His Highness Jianghu of Silla was the best. Speaking of his wife, she had been with him for so long, but she didn't have any good fortune. When the family was in dire straits, she had to weave cloth to make money to support the family. It was really hard for her. He took out the candied fruits that he spent 10 copper coins to buy today, pushed open the door and said loudly, "First mother, I'm back." A woman walked out of the room and said, "You're back. Come in quickly. I'll cook immediately." Wu Laosan walked in and asked with a frown, "Where did you go today? Why are you only cooking now?" The woman said softly, "Today the cloth shop in the city is recruiting people. I asked third aunt to accompany me to take a look. The cloth shop is recruiting people. Why did you go there?" Wu Laosan frowned and said, "You're a woman. Why don't you stay at home? Don't run around all day." He threw a paper bag on the table and said, "When it comes to earning money, us men will do it. Can you women earn 20 copper coins a day? This is the candied fruit that I bought from Su Fuji today. Try it. If you like it, I'll buy it for you in a few days." "I know." The woman opened the paper bag and said softly. Wu Laosan took a cold steamed bun and ate it. He asked casually, "Oh right, how much does the cloth shop pay you every day?" 300 copper coins. Wu Laosan took a bite of the steamed bun. His expression froze. He looked at her and asked in a muffled voice, "How much? 3 copper coins?" The woman took a bite of the candied fruit and said softly, "Everyone else pays 30 copper coins. I showed them the cloth that I used to weave. They said that I was good at weaving and the flowers were beautiful. They asked me to teach them how to weave. They paid me 300 copper coins a day." Wu Laosan was stunned for a while. He grabbed the kettle and gulped down the steamed bun. He put down the kettle and slammed the table. He said loudly, "You're a woman. Don't you feel bored staying at home all day? There's a chance you should go out and see more. Where's the cloth shop you mentioned? Bring me there tomorrow. They only hire women. Don't I know that they only hire women?" Wu Laosan looked at her and said seriously, "I'm looking for you to see if they're lying. Women like you are the easiest to be deceived. No, that's the workshop of the Jianghu of Silla. They won't lie." Wu Laosan looked at her and then at the paper bag in her hand. He put the cold steamed bun aside and pursed his lips. He said, "Come, let me try a piece of the candied fruit, the pandemonium." Fang Yu put down a piece of paper and said, "Building a shop? What is this Li Yi doing?" He turned to look at the man in purple and asked, "Is the news true?" The man in purple nodded and said, "I've asked the local people. They want to build a shopping mall there. It's said that they'll be opening before the new year. They had lost contact with the messengers of the holy religion in charge of Shu province. This meant that they couldn't contact the believers in Shu province. If they wanted to obtain information, they could only ask the local people. Fang Yu frowned and murmured, "Why does it have to be the West Gate? Are you stupid? There are 4 gates in the east, west, south, and north. Only the West Gate is the most useless. It's not open all year round. If they didn't choose the West Gate, would they choose the other 3? The king of Shu walked over from the side and looked at him. He said, "You may not know this, but Li Yi's greatest strength is not in governing the country but in business. He should be making a good profit during the New Year's festival. Didn't he find a way to keep those merchants in Shuzhou?" Fang Yu shook his head. "I'm just worried. There's nothing to worry about." The king of Shu shook his head and said, "There are 3,000 soldiers stationed in Shu province. Yong County can only mobilize 2,000 soldiers at most. They're just a bunch of stragglers and are nothing to be afraid of. As long as your people can open the city gates, no one can stop us." "I know." Fang Yu shook his head and said, "But it's better to be careful." The king of Shu shook his head and revealed an excited expression. He said, "I think it's best to wait until after the Lantern Festival to make a move. When he has earned enough money, we can slaughter a fat sheep." Chapter 10:15. The king of Shu postponed the day of action for half a month. Before the Lantern Festival, Li Yi could only accept it passively. He couldn't force him to do it with a knife on his neck, which would be too inhumane. Everyone had problems to discuss, express their opinions and compromise with each other. This was the way to solve problems. For example, he helped him plan the time and route. He thought it was better to take action after the Spring Festival. He also thought what he said made sense. They would meet at the Lantern Festival and the matter was settled. The following things were much easier. If Shuzhou wanted to develop, the first thing to get rid of was the closed or outdated policies after eliminating the corrupt officials, bandits, and the unstable factor of the king of Shu. At present, for ordinary people in Shuzhou, agriculture was still the most important and basic. It was related to whether they could have enough to eat and whether they would be hungry. On this basis, it was necessary to emphasize that industry, agriculture, and commerce should go hand in hand and develop together. That was what they had been doing these days. They lowered the tariff, attracted investment, canceled the curfew, opened the night market, built workshops, and provided a large number of jobs for idle women at home. The goods produced in the workshops were sold to merchants from other countries. Shuzhou would become the first special economic zone in the Jing kingdom. Walking Rui and watching on the streets of Yong County again, it was quite different from a few months ago. The streets of Yong County used to be dirty and messy. Garbage could be seen everywhere and sewage ditches were everywhere. When they passed some roads, they had to cover their mouths and noses. Now the streets were cleaned by professionals. Although it was not spotless, at least it was not dirty and messy anymore. Of course, the Yong County government did this not only to implement the provincial governor's policy. Since the reform of the tariff and commercial laws in Shuzhou, it attracted merchants from the Jing kingdom, the Qi kingdom, and even the Wu kingdom in a short period of time. Shuzhou's geographical location was special. It was the place where these merchants had to pass to and from other countries. Now, after the reform of the commercial laws, no other state was more friendly to these merchants than Shuzhou. Every day there were goods from all over the world converging here. There was no need to travel everywhere. Anything they wanted to buy could be found in Yong County. Free trade. The merchants weren't the only ones who were happy. The officials of Yong County were even happier. Although the tax rate for foreign businessmen has been reduced, the total tax amount has increased tenfold. Those businessmen came here to rent shops, land, and workshops. Although they can't touch these silvers, they are still happy to see them. What's more, these silvers would eventually be used in Shu province. This included their bonuses. With a little performance, just the year-end bonus alone would be equivalent to a year's salary. Before this, they had thought that the new provincial governor Chen had lost his mind. Only now did they realize that it was His Highness Jianghu of Silla who had a unique vision and foresight. "I heard that His Highness Jianghu of Silla is about to get married. I heard about it. In a few days, all the brothels in the city will have free performances for 3 days. Now we can watch to our heart's content." His Highness has only been in Shu province for a few months, but the officials have already become better. There are no more bandits. Life is changing day by day. My wife works in the cloth shop and can earn 30 copper coins a day. I only earn a few copper coins after working so hard every day. Sigh. You can just laugh secretly. We have been waiting for the stars and the moon for so many years before His Highness finally came. This time, we have to show our appreciation for His Highness's wedding. We have almost accumulated a basket of eggs at home. Although they aren't worth much, it can be considered a small token of our appreciation. Li Yi hadn't shown her face in public many times. Therefore she could walk with Rui and Ruoqing on the street without worrying about being recognized. Rui had said before that she wanted to pass down the kung fu of the Liu family. Li Yi asked Ruoqing to pick a dozen girls of the right age from the brothels. Now that she had nothing to do, she would teach them kung fu. Of course, she would also bring Drunken Mo and Ruoqing with her. Although Drunken Mo and Ruoqing had long passed the age of learning kung fu, and their achievements in this life were limited, it was impossible for them to become masters like her or even Mississippi Liu, who could dominate the martial arts world. However, with a master teaching them, their progress would not be slow. On the contrary, it made Li Yi, who had always been lazy, feel some pressure. If they became more powerful, it would be difficult for him to be a husband again. Ruoqing was fine, but with Drunken Mo's temper, it was hard to say what would happen after marriage. In the end, who would be on top and who would be on the bottom, who would be active and who would be passive? However, a man should be flexible, so he didn't need to care about these things. Drunken Mo's wedding dress had been embroidered a long time ago. Now that the former emperor had passed away, the one-year period was about to pass. At the beginning of next year, it would be time to return the wedding that he owed them. Beside a small stall by the roadside, Rui and Ruoqing walked over, picked up an exquisite hairpin, and inserted it into Ruoqing's hair, saying, "This hairpin matches my sister quite well." Li looked at it. This hairpin was indeed exquisite. Judging from its style, it didn't seem to be from the Jing kingdom. Now in Yong County, merchants from all over the world gathered, and any small stall on the street could buy a lot of good things. Beside the two of them, another woman also picked up a hairpin. She turned around and said to a man in a yamen uniform, "Husband, this hairpin is beautiful." "I want this one." The official frowned and said, "Didn't I just buy one for you yesterday? Why do you want it?" The woman grabbed his arm, shook it hard and said angrily, "No, I want it, I want it, I want it." Okay. The official hurriedly agreed. Now when he heard her say, "I want it," his legs would unconsciously go soft. What was a night of love worth 1,000 gold? It was all a lie. She was a good girl before marriage, how could she become like this after marriage? Habitually holding his waist, he looked at the merchant and asked, "How much is this hairpin?" "You really have a good eye." Seeing him pick the hairpin, the merchant's eyes lit up and said, "This is the hairpin that Empress Wendy wore on her head when she committed suicide. It's a priceless treasure." "Who are you lying to?" "Which empress committed suicide? If you talk nonsense again, I'll take you to the officials." The official glared at him. If it weren't for the county magistrate asking them to treat these merchants better, the lies he had just fabricated were enough to make him shed a layer of skin. "It's Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom." The merchant hurriedly shook his head and said, "Sir, you can take a closer look. This style, this material, it's really a real royal thing. If it weren't for the fact that this is the Jing Kingdom, I wouldn't dare to sell it." The official looked at him and shook his head, saying, "Just tell me how much it is." 1,000 taels. The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked at him and said, "I might as well tell you the truth. This hairpin is the relic of Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom. I only dare to sell it here. 1,000 taels, 1,000 taels, no lower." "Let's go." The official took the woman's hand and turned around to leave. 1,000 taels? 1,000 taels? He had to think about it. 1,000 taels? Even if he sold himself, it wouldn't be enough. The woman also knew that they couldn't afford it. After looking at it longingly, she could only sigh and leave. "Sir, don't go. Don't go." Seeing that they were about to leave, the merchant from the Wu Kingdom immediately said, "Another 2 taels, 998, how about 998? Hey sir, another 598, 498, 498. Wait." Li picked up the hairpin just now, looked at the merchant from the Wu Kingdom and asked, "You said that this is the relic of Empress Wendy of the Wu Kingdom. Do you have any proof?" The merchant from the Wu Kingdom was stunned. He did not expect that after one person left, another person would come. The young master in front of him seemed to be much wealthier than the previous one. Just from the clothes of the 2 female companions beside him, one could tell that. The official who had just turned around and left also stopped after hearing that. He looked back at the back of that person, wanting to see who was so stupid to spend 1,000 taels to buy such a fake. Chapter 10:16. The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked at him and said with a smile, "Sir, you are not an ordinary person at first glance. Whether it belongs to the royal family or not, you will know when you take a closer look." Li Yi could see that this hairpin was not an ordinary one. Except for the queen of a country, it was a big crime for anyone to use a phoenix hairpin. Few people had the guts to forge this hairpin and sell it. Judging from the texture and the fine workmanship, it did seem to belong to the royal family. Seeing his expression, the merchant from the Wu Kingdom was delighted and asked, "Young master, is it worth it to buy this hairpin for 1,000 taels of silver?" Li Yi glanced at him and put away the hairpin, saying, "Didn't you say 498 taels of silver just now? I will give you another 200 taels of silver. So I want this hairpin for 500 taels of silver." "Sir, this." The merchant from the Wu Kingdom looked depressed. He really shouldn't have said those words just now. The official obviously didn't want to buy it. He shouted for nothing, but now 500 taels of silver flew away just like that. However, he also knew that it was not easy to sell this thing. It was a profit to have 500 taels of silver. He could only nod helplessly and said with his teeth clenched, 500 taels of silver, it is okay." Behind Li Yi, the woman just now looked at him and curled her lips, saying, 500 taels of silver for such a fake. Are you stupid? The merchant from the Wu Kingdom was furious. He looked at her and said loudly, "What fake? Do you think this young master is as ignorant as you are?" When the woman was about to speak, she found that the man next to her suddenly pulled her arm. Before she could ask anything, she saw her husband's legs go soft and he knelt down. The official looked pale. Looking at the young man in front of him, he said in a trembling voice, "Greetings, Your Highness Jianghu of Silla. I didn't know Your Highness and offended you. Please forgive me, Your Highness." "Jing, Your Highness Jianghu of Silla." Hearing that, the woman's face turned pale and she also knelt down with her husband. As for the merchant from the Wu Kingdom, when he knew that the person in front of him was the famous His Highness Jianghu of Silla, he was stunned and his body trembled. Where? His Highness Jianghu of Silla, where is His Highness? I haven't seen what His Highness looks like. I'll pay for the hairpin at the Jianghu of Silla's residence. Seeing that there was already a commotion on the street, Li Yi glanced at the businessman from the Wu Kingdom. With one hand holding Rui and the other hand holding Ruoqing, they quickly disappeared into the alley ahead. At first he was the one pulling Rui and Ruoqing as they ran. Later, Rui was the one carrying them on each side as they flew in the sky. Only then did he get rid of the people of Yong County who were rushing over from all directions. He flew back to the Jianghu of Silla mansion and sat in the small courtyard. He took a long time to calm down. In his previous life, he had only seen such a scene when he passed by an airport and saw the fans of a certain A-list celebrity welcoming him. He didn't expect that he would have such a day. It seemed that practicing martial arts was the right choice. If he didn't have the ability to fly in the sky, he might not be able to resist these fans. In addition, he had to urge Ruoqing to practice martial arts, especially to practice lightness skill. The holy religion had 100,000 followers in the Qi Kingdom. Thinking of the scene, he was a little scared. Only the queen who could fly could control the scene. After drinking a cup of the new cocktail developed by Xiao Zhu yesterday, he took out the hairpin he had just bought. Li Yi was very familiar with the palace. Therefore, when he saw the hairpin at first sight, he knew it was not an ordinary thing. But he didn't expect that it was worn by Empress Wendy before she died. Empress Wendy was the former empress of the Wu Kingdom. After the current emperor of the Wu Kingdom killed his brother and father, she committed suicide. Now he was sure that Yang Liuqing was the princess of the Wu Kingdom. After the emperor of the Wu Kingdom usurped the throne, she fled the palace. Then this Empress Wendy must be Yang Liuqing's mother. Since he saw it, he naturally had to help her put away Empress Wendy's belongings. He would return them to her when he saw them in the future. Several months ago, the news about Yang Liuqing was directly cut off. Of course, it wasn't because something had happened to her. It was just that the Wu Kingdom was now full of heroes and chaos. The imperial court wanted to get rid of these people as soon as possible. She was the most important person to pay attention to. If she didn't hide her trace, the imperial court would definitely encircle her. Whether it was the Lu League or the brothel, they had no sources in the Wu Kingdom. Even the imperial court of the Wu Kingdom couldn't find Yang Liuqing. Of course, it was impossible for Li Yi to find her himself. Recently Mississippi Lu didn't mention going to the Wu Kingdom. The Lu League needed to take root in Suzhou again. As the League leader she had to deal with many things in person. Of course, more importantly, even if the two of them and the whole Lu League joined forces, they still couldn't compete with a country. Today Mississippi Lu had already changed her rash temperament. Except for taking action when she disagreed with him, she didn't have that kind of irrational impulse anymore. In retrospect, she had really changed a lot in the past few years. But the biggest change was reflected in her cooking skills. A woman changed 18 times before she grew up, and a fairy fell to the mortal world. 2 years ago, looking at the chicken pieces that she burned into charcoal, he would never have imagined that one day he would miss the dishes cooked by Mississippi Lu. Fong poked his head out of the door and said, "Young master, there's someone outside. He said that you bought the hairpin from him and didn't pay for it." Coincidentally, he still had some details to ask the merchant from the Wu Kingdom. In case he made a mistake in the future, Li Yi turned his head and said, "Let him in." After a while, the merchant from the Wu Kingdom walked over with fear and trepidation. He bowed respectfully and said, "Your Highness, I pay my respects to you." At this moment he was a little nervous. If the person who bought his hairpin was not His Highness Jianghu of Silla, who was praised by everyone in Suzhou, he would never dare to come to the prince's mansion to ask for money. He wanted to take the money and leave, but he didn't expect that he would be summoned by Jianghu of Silla. Li looked at him and said casually, "You really dare to come here?" Plop. The merchant from the Wu Kingdom turned pale. His legs gave way and he knelt on the ground crying, "Your Highness, I don't want the money anymore. That hairpin is a gift from me. Your Highness, please spare my life. Please spare my life." "Who wants your life?" Li looked at him and said, "Stand up and talk. Let me ask you, since this hairpin is a relic of Empress Wendy, why do you have it?" The merchant from the Wu Kingdom saw that Jianghu of Silla didn't seem to be angry, but he didn't stand up. He knelt on the ground and said carefully, "Your Highness, this hairpin was secretly taken out by one of Empress Wendy's personal palace maids after she committed suicide. In the Wu Kingdom no one dares to touch it. It changed hands several times and came to me. I thought that I might be able to sell it in Suzhou." Li Yi asked a few more questions, and the merchant from the Wu Kingdom answered without any hesitation or pause. He didn't seem to be lying. Moreover, with his eyesight, he was sure that this phoenix hairpin was a relic of Yang Liuking's mother. "All right, you can leave." Li looked at Fong and said, "Give him 1,000 taels of silver." The merchant from the Wu Kingdom was stunned and said quickly, "Your Highness, did you remember wrong? It's 500 taels." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Then give him 500 taels of silver." The merchant from the Wu Kingdom didn't look at his palm until he walked out of the Jianghu of Silla's mansion. Suddenly he raised his hand and slapped himself hard in the face. In the small courtyard, Li Yi held the hairpin and carefully looked at it. Fong ran in again and said loudly, "Young master, there's a letter from the capital." Putting the matter of the hairpin aside, Li Yi opened the letters that had just been delivered by the courier station. Every month he would send a few letters to the capital and he would receive a few of them. He opened the first letter first. It was written by the old granny. She only told him about the current situation of the Li family in the capital. Everything was fine and she told him not to worry. She mentioned that Suzhou was remote and chaotic, and she warned him to be careful when he was outside. Then she asked about Rui, Ruoqing, Zumo, and the others. She even asked about Xiaohuan and Rui. After asking about her baby great-grandson, she told him that they should quickly spread the branches of the Li family. In her lifetime she still wanted to hold a few more great-grandchildren. And Rui, Ruoqing, Zumo, Rui, and Xiaohuan to spread the branches of the Li family. After all, the old granny was old and muddle-headed. She didn't even notice that something terrible had been mixed in. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.